Call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Begin by just saying, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted via remote participation from the public. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. We have a lot on the agenda. I'll just kind of say for anybody from the public, we're going to go a little bit out of order just to kind of give you the order tonight. We're going to start with public input, then student report, and then we're going to go to our guests so we don't keep them for too long. We have members of the VOC and the CIT here, and then we'll go to the regular agenda as posted. We're going to begin with any public input. If anybody has anything they would like to talk about that is not on the agenda, please raise your hand, chat, unmute, something. Okay, I hear nothing, so we're going to move on to the student report. Did not go through, actually, I should probably state for the record that all members of the school committee are here right now, so, and Dr. Daly, the superintendent, and the assistant superintendent, Michael Connolly, are here as well. So we're going to go to the student report, and Shivi Srikanth, I believe, is here with us tonight, class of 2022. I see Shivi. Hi, Shivi. Do you want to do the student report?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Just starting out with a quick rundown of some things that are going on in high school right now. To start out, we're in a lull between sports seasons. As of now, volleyball and cheerleading have started up their practices and are working to find a safe way to continue doing that. In addition, all the fields have been cleared for football, and that season is expected to start up on time. In terms of club activities, Team Cure is working on its next project right now, and they are creating a card and a video message and compiling care packages for patients with cancer. In addition, the Youth Action Team and Social Activism Clubs are working together on a submission to the state contest to submit a PSA project around restorative justice. For academic matters, the SAT for juniors is to be held in early April at NRHS, and freshman and sophomore course selections are underway, with junior course selections just closing. In addition, finalized AP testing dates are coming out as of now, and these dates are being modified to provide multiple testing options for schools to choose from. And finally, the MCAS for juniors, freshmen, and sophomores are also coming up, and juniors will be taking the MCAS this year to make up for missing the standardized test last year due to COVID. I also thought I would touch a little bit on some of the new plans that the school is implementing in COVID, as well as some student opinions and input on those topics. After asking some of my peers to give their thoughts on sport times, the overwhelming majority preferred the idea of keeping the 8:30 start time for the rest of this school year and into coming school years. And many students claim that this later start time allowed them to stay up late to finish their schoolwork, and they were able to sleep in and not compromise on sleep. Students also made the case that it's really easy to adjust to a later start time as they are already inclined to sleep in. But if we were to revert to the 7:30 start time at high school, going back to an earlier start time would be very difficult to adapt to. Another large concern with later school times that many people have expressed is that students would get out of school later, and that this would push extracurricular activities and sports to a later time. However, after talking with some student athletes, many said they didn't feel any negative impact of having later start times, and they support that policy. In terms of the new policy of returning full-time to school or staying remote and getting a hybrid model, many students did express some concern about large numbers in school, and some asserted the idea that there shouldn't be a rush to get students back to class this year, although many conceded that productivity in class would increase if school returned to in-person learning, and agreed that if the state mandated the new change to be safe, that they would trust authorities' judgment. Another said that a stark change in schedule could be harmful for students who've gotten used to this so far, but also conceded that productivity would increase if we were back in class. Kind of moving on from that really quickly, to wrap up, I was just going to mention a quick piece of student work that my world history class worked on last term. And this utilized virtual learning and kind of virtual software really effectively. With a software that was able to simulate a museum experience, students were told to design their own well-researched museum exhibit pertaining to the Holocaust. And in a year where we couldn't have dioramas or physical paper for exhibiting our layout, my peers agreed that this, with a software that allowed us to work on this project, was a fun way to go about it. And that's kind of all I had for the high school report.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Shizzy? Excellent report, and I see that Dr. Daly got the message to you. I wanted to hear any thoughts on some of the things on the agenda tonight, so I appreciate the feedback and asking some of your colleagues. So, yeah, Dr. Daly.
Good. So I just wanted to share, Shivani and I and the other student reps to the school committee discussed, we are working on a student survey as well that would look similar to what you sent out to parents and families, because I want to get I really appreciate the information she's collected, but I think we can do that maybe for all middle and high school students to collect some more information. So I've asked them to work with me to craft that survey. I know that one of our goals is to involve them even more in what we're doing, and I think they're excited to be a part of that process. So I appreciate what she shared tonight, and I think we can expand on that in the coming week.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, and as always, Shivy, you're welcome to stay as long as you want and weigh into anything, or if you have homework to do, that's fine as well. We're going to move on. Before we do reopening, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'd like to start with the members of the public that were invited for different topics, and so we're going to start with, we have some representatives here from the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational High School, and so we have a number of people here. If they would like to, I don't know who wants to speak first, but if you want to unmute, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hi, this is Judy. Again, I want to thank you for having us. We always look forward to this every year. I'm sure your biggest concerns are how we're doing with the COVID in regards to getting the school back up and running, and also where we are with the new school building project. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dave DeBerry so that he can address those questions.
Sure. Thanks, Judy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Oh, great. Great. So I also have James Bacone, our finance director, on with us, and Dr. Scazzarella, our principal. She's here as well. My wingman and wingwoman, in case I get jammed up with some questions. But I think, North Reading and Northeast is sharing a lot of the same issues, obviously, with the pandemic, trying to get as many kids back into school as possible. Being very excited about the prospect of bringing more students back. Currently, we are a hybrid district. We have our students in about 50% capacity. And going into third trimester, we're going to try to increase that a bit and bring some of the vocational students in a little bit more. One challenge that we have, and we've had all, is the transportation issue, trying to bus in over 1,200 students from 12 different communities has been a challenge. As you know, there are certain busing guidelines now that make it difficult to, to deal with transportation. But we're doing our best, and we look forward to getting our students in safely. So that's where we're at with the pandemic. Some exciting news is that we are underway. We've been coming, I think, since Judy's first year as a representative, and it was a dream, 5-6 years ago when we said that we were going to do our best to maybe get accepted into the MSBA grant project. But not only are we now accepted, we're actually in module 4, which is the schematic design, which is really our last piece prior to approval for the school. So we should know at the August MSBA meeting if our project is accepted, which we are fully certain it will be. It's more a matter of them looking at our designs and our estimates and letting us know how much the grant will be for. So at our previous meeting with the MSBA, they approved the plan to allow us to build for 1,600 students. So right now we have about 1,250 students. Because our waiting list was so great, it only made sense to try to build a school big enough to cut that waiting list down. Initially, we had hoped on a school that would fit over 1,700, but when we looked at the math and looked at the impact it would have on our communities, especially our inner city communities where our highest populations were, we knew that it would be too challenging. So after speaking to town managers and mayors and then presenting to MSBA, we've compromised to 1,600, and we feel that will dramatically cut the wait list down and be able to build a great school. So we are very excited. It would be coming to a vote this fall. So after the August meeting, the MSBA will tell us how much they believe the school will cost. I will go to my school committee in September and ask them to vote to approve the project and to approve a bond for that project. I'm very confident they will approve that. At that point, the cities and towns have 6 days to meet if they want to vote against the project. So many of the cities and towns, when there is a regional project, if there isn't a huge impact, don't always go to a vote. Sometimes it's more costly to have a special town meeting than it is to pay the extra money per student. So we expect probably 50% of our cities and towns will have a town meeting or city council meeting. If they vote yes, great. If we get a no vote, then we would have to go to a special election, a popular election, which we are prepared to do because we understand to get a unanimous yes vote from 12 cities and towns is a challenge. However, we feel pretty confident when we, explain the needs we have and the fiscal impacts that we will be supported. But in case we're not, we are ready to go to an election. But it's very exciting. We're just beginning the process where we're actually designing the details of the actual school. And I know North Reading very recently went through a similar situation, and you know how stressful it can be. And I've toured the North Reading high school a couple of times, in middle school. So I've had a lot of our ideas for our plans is going to be based on a few things I'm stealing from your school. And I'm sure you won't mind about that. But enough of me. If I can open up to any questions or any comments from any of us, that'd be great.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBerry. Any comments,
Welcome.
questions? Well, I'll ask a question or two, and since I know we have masks on, nobody can tell who's talking. I'll try to identify myself here and there. So, this is Scott Buckley. First question is just, you mentioned the transportation challenges with COVID, but with a vocational school, I would assume that there'd be a lot of additional challenges versus a traditional high school, because aren't a lot of the programs hands-on, and how have you been able to deal with a hybrid approach with some of the programs that you run?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, because vocational shops are required to be much larger than classrooms, when we went in to do our 3 to 6 foot measurements, we were actually fine with all of the vocational programs. We had to put plans in place. Obviously, if students were using tools, we had to change our policies and procedures. We ordered some special touch pads that they carry in a lot of hospitals and operating rooms that would kill germs instantaneously. So we had those special, they look like stickers, but again, they're for sanitizing. And we were able to put those on doors, on equipment, on tools. So believe it or not, it's really been the lunch facilities and the smaller classroom space that caused us the largest challenge other than transportation as far as getting the kids in.
Excellent. And then everything about the new project sounds great. My only other question is, the last couple times you've been here, we've spoken about the summer program and kind of like the introduction. Is the plan still to run it this year or not?
Yeah, we did. We ran it virtually, and amazingly, we probably had our highest number of applicants who attended the summer program, and parents were thrilled at that point, because what we had done, which was a little different from a regular summer program, is we actually made kits up for all of our incoming ninth graders that had all of the supplies necessary and the tools necessary to do hands-on projects at home. So for parents to see kids actually working on physical things and not just staring at a screen, listening to instructor, I think it brought a little bit of an excitement on, coming into Northeast in the fall, knowing that even if we do have to go remote, that the students will be active and not just, we all know, staring at a screen. And so it was a huge success. I was as shocked as everybody, but it's definitely not going to be as good as what it's going to be this summer, when hopefully we get the kids back in here and start working again.
Excellent. Anybody else have any questions? Janine and Brianna.
Hi, I just want.
Sorry. I forgot about that. Hi, I just wanted to say congratulations. I'm glad that you guys have gotten this far, and I hope it goes through.
Thanks so much, Janine.
Mr. Connolly.
Great, thank you. Hi. Good evening, this is Mike Conley. I just wanted to mention, take the opportunity when we have each of you here, that you recently, this past week, your team of with Richard McGinnis and David Fabrizio with the students, have started to work on our dugout project down at the softball field. So I know that was because of the pandemic delayed about a year, but we are so pleased to be partnering with each of you in that effort. And it's been exciting to see that project get started and see some activity down there. Very confident that it's going to be a very successful project and a significant upgrade for that facility and for the softball, not only the varsity, junior varsity, freshman teams here, but for the community as well. So I did want to just take the opportunity to thank you and your team for working with us on that and kind of persevering and staying with us as we work through the pandemic and the delays and the challenges. So it's exciting to see that project take shape this week.
Great.
I'd like to comment on that. I'm excited about them doing that. And that is something that this school committee, the Northeast School Committee, is really adamant about, doing projects in our cities and towns. And we take great pride in that. The kids get really excited about doing it too. Am I right, Dave?
Oh, absolutely. And I actually got a call from, one of our consultants who is looking forward to a press release or some sort of news article about the two school systems collaborating like we are. So, yeah, so stay tuned for that. I hope to see that in one of the North Reading newspapers pretty soon.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay. No more questions. Thank you very much, everyone, and good luck on the projects, and keep us posted.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, Judy. Okay, so moving on to other guests. I believe we have somebody here from the community impact team. I'm guessing Amy Luckwitz, although I didn't see her. Amy, are you that? You're under North Reading CIP. Hi, Amy, proud BC grad as well, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Daly actually has the presentation, unless you need me to show it. I'll just get started. So if you can believe, we are fully in our 5th year of the Drug-Free Communities Grant Program. This is something that has had support from the school committee since our application, actually, so going beyond 5 years. And I wanted to first give you a very brief update about what's going on with that grant. It is set to expire at the end of September of this year. We are planning on reapplying for an additional 5 years of funding. However, unfortunately, the grant was set to release about 3 weeks ago, and it still has not been released by the feds for application. They have reassured us, though, that it will be available to apply, but of course, we're not guaranteed that additional funding. It will be a competitive grant again, and so as a backup plan, we are hoping to propose incorporating our full drug-free communities budget of $125,000 into the town budget, but that won't be discussed until October town meeting. So that is our contingency plan. And Dr. Daly and I tonight, we're just going to review with you our request to implement the core measurement survey. Just as a reminder to everybody, this is information that we collect every year. And it shows, basically, it's very difficult to measure our work, except in this area. We're able to collect data about grades 6 through 12 each year. It also reflects the work that the volunteers do through the coalition. And I have to mention Mrs. Imbriano, who has been a very active member of the coalition for many years. Thank you for waving there. Very active, and it's been great to have the participation of the school members as well. Cynthia Conan is facilitating a project for us right now to assist getting education into 5th grade on vaping. So back to the core measurement survey. Each year we are required to collect data across 4 substances: alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and prescription drug use. But in North Reading, we feel that we need to separate vaping into its own, whereas the lump that in with nicotine. We've talked a lot about that over the past few years. We actually collect data across 5 substances. We have 4 questions that we are required to ask. The first is your past 30-day use. The second has to do with perception of risk or harm. So basically, if you were to take these substances, do you think you're doing, or to what degree do you think you're doing harm to your body? And the third and fourth questions are related to your perception of what your parents or adults would think if they found out that you were using, and what would your peers think if they found out? And this all ties into, scientifically ties into an increased probability of student using. So if conditions were favorable in the home that, they felt their parent would think no big deal, let's say if they use marijuana, or their peers thought it was very common to use marijuana, for example, that student would be more likely to use. So this is why we collect that data. It's also important for us that we look at age of first use. So at what age did you first start using a substance? And this year we are significantly scaling back the survey. Last year, the average amount of questions, it was slightly different for middle school and high school. It was around 33 questions total. And this year, I believe we're going to be doing 16 questions. Of the 16, though, I believe 11 are unique. And the reason that's a different measurement is because sometimes when you scroll down on the survey, we separated a question into 3 just so that the student wouldn't have to go up and down to see what the possible answers might be. Dr. Daly, do you want to talk about the implementation plan?
Sure. I was just trying to bring it up on the screen, but I'm having a little trouble. But we are planning, the high school has already sent out a form for the staff just proactively, because they do, based on some upcoming events, they want to try to have this take place next week. So they've sort of sent out information that this is a possibility if it's pending approval tonight with the opt-out provision. The middle school is looking to do this sort of the week of the 9th, so to come up with that. So we have plans to roll this out at multiple grade levels. I know that it was important for us to get students both at middle school, but also at the lower 9th, 10th grade, also the upper 12th grade. We have a plan to get additional students at all those levels. Pending approval tonight, I did share the questions with you with some of that information. We, in the past, added additional questions to the survey. This year, we did not. We kept it streamlined to what is coming from this group, and I think we're ready to proceed with that. Again, I know there's always a question about, is there an opt-out provision? There is. It's very clear. It's a Google form. Folks can fill out. We've had some come in already, so I know that it's working. That will come up from middle school soon, and it's already come up from high school. And the second thing being, the principals are both very comfortable with these questions. They've vetted them, and we've used them in the past.
very much.
Thanks. I'm not sure, I couldn't hear you entirely, but I'm not sure if you added that the student has the option to begin the survey, stop it at any point, or even skip questions. I'm not sure if you mentioned that. I couldn't hear very well. I just want to add two more things. The importance of we need this information now. And the first is because it will be used in our application coming up as soon as it gets released. But the second reason is because last year during COVID, we got such a poor response in terms of quantity that it was not reliable data. So we like to take this information every year, of course, and so we are going to have a gap from 2020. And so we're very interested in seeing what the 2021 findings are, especially because probably the number one question I get asked in my job is student use of whatever substance up, down, steady, and of course their social life has very much changed. And my answer is always, I don't know. I don't know until I get this information back and can give you a comparison versus 2019. So I appreciate it, and I'll stay on if you have any other questions.
Well, you took my first question, so that's out. Anybody have any questions for Amy? The only question I have is an odd one, just because somebody actually reached out to me about getting involved, and I mentioned the community impact team. And so I don't know if somebody wanted to start getting involved in community impact team, or even like the K through 12 committee that I was on in the past. How would somebody reach out? Reach out to you? Is there an email?
Yeah, great question. We actually just had somebody reaching out, so I wonder if it's the same person. And my response back is, this a student or an adult? Because we do have volunteer opportunities for both students and adults. If somebody is a student and they want to become involved in the youth action team, they can contact me and I'll connect them to the youth services director, Jen Ford, who oversees that. If they want to join the coalition in general, that's what Mrs. Imbriano is on. I have an application for that. And so they can just reach out to me. My easiest email without my last name is coalition@northreadingma.gov.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. So do we need a motion to approve the community impact team surveys for this year?
I believe so.
Okay.
I would like to make that motion to accept the community impact survey for the middle school and high school. Second?
Okay, second by Diana. Roll call vote. Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Aye as well. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. I'll, of course, we share with you first the results.
Okay.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's all the guests we have tonight. So we're gonna go back to the top and go to continued business. We actually have some people here tonight. I'm guessing many want to hear about the reopening, especially with some of the news coming out from the state level. So Dr. Daly, I turn it over to you for a reopening update.
Are you sure that I'm going to see who gets on the facilities master plan?
Well, it could be the budget. Mike Connolly's a pretty
Could
big
be the
draw.
budget. So of course, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks here to learn more. We're going to just provide our updates as we, Mr. Papavasili, I just want to check, were you able to hear us, or was it an audio issue with our speaking?
The issue was that whenever somebody that's not present in that room speaks, the speaker in that room was slightly feeding back into the microphone in the room. So it was a little, I could hear probably 90% of things. It's not that any one member, but you have what I'm saying right now broadcasting, and you also have a live mic, and sometimes it was picking up on that a little bit, I think, from our guests.
Okay. It should work pretty well. We've done this a lot with the speakerphone, so thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So a few things I want to update on. Obviously, we have been following through with our COVID-19 testing. We have successfully implemented pooled testing. For the past 2 weeks, we started last week with all of our staff that had registered. This week, we did a pilot with any student groups. We ultimately, all students who had enrolled were able to participate this week. We weren't sure. We wanted to scale it up, but we were able to do all students that were enrolled as of Sunday night. There's some that have come in this week that'll be included next week. All of our pools have been negative. We had a couple of pools that were invalid with staff that we learned what was wrong. Someone had put if you put the Q-tip in upside down or something, it can invalidate the pool. So it's taught us a few lessons, and that's really why we did this to scale up. The program has been extended through April 18th, which is wonderful. So that is covered. Our plan is to continue it through that fully funded by DESE timeline. And we do not have plans to continue it after that point. And we certainly hope by that point, many of our staff will be vaccinated. Obviously, the students will not, but our fingers are crossed with the announcement yesterday that staff will be able to be vaccinated beginning on March 11th. Some are able to get their vaccinations a little bit earlier, but that is very welcome news. We've been trying to advocate for that in many different ways, through letters to legislators and Governor Baker, the commissioner, through our Superintendents Association, through joint letters that I've shared with the union leaders. And we feel that this prioritization, the teachers were the next group, but this certainly moves them up. They are the only group really, and it's all educators and all staff in schools that are able to come in. And that certainly has been made very clear that this is not a prerequisite for reopening school, but it is certainly something that we think is an important step to bring everyone's safety and concerns, the anxiety around safety down. And pool testing also does that. I think that assurance that you've now been tested and your pool came back negative, and certainly many of the others in the building also in that same situation, is very comforting news. The last time we were meeting, we were talking about just the large numbers of cases that were being reported and was an overload. We were talking about needing to close a school. We were talking about some risk of transmission in school. So a lot has improved and changed in just a few short weeks. I'm very confident that as things move forward and it starts to get warmer and more folks are vaccinated, things are certainly heading in the right direction. The district, the town has been in the red to the yellow. It sort of went back and forth a few times. We are heading in the right direction and continuing to have very low cases. We've had only one case this week and one case last week, and I still have one to report from this week. But that's really very positive news with our numbers. So we are, I'm just going to bring you through a little bit of where we are with this process. So for quite some time now, I've been speaking with the teachers union leadership and other union leaders about the possibility of a return, what that would look like, what it could look like as these things started to fall into place. So we've been in a very good place as far as having those conversations. We feel that our model as designed is adaptable, and we really designed it that way from the outset, that if we ever had to shift to full remote or if we ever had to shift back to full in person, the way we've designed it, the way we've set up our classes, it will not be that difficult to make those shifts. There are some major hindrances that we need to still work out, the biggest of which is lunch. So the biggest hindrance, the two were busing and lunches. So when we first talked about this a few weeks ago, we discussed, in the survey that I sent out several weeks ago, if you recall, was, would you be willing to come back at less than 6 feet? And it was overwhelmingly, it was close to 70-30. It was 65, around there percent saying no, they weren't comfortable there, especially when you factored in that people that were on the bus might not be able to take the bus. The bus guidance has been changed, and it essentially has been lifted to allow more students on the buses. So that was the first hurdle that the guidance at the state level was able to clear up. Lunches is still something that it's certainly a problem that we're going to work on to solve. But what folks need to understand is, in order to bring students back, we will have to be at less than 6 feet with masks. And so in order to do that successfully, I think we can do that in the classrooms. There are some challenges, though, whenever that mask comes down. And whenever we have seen transmission in our schools, it's been in situations where someone's mask was not on. In a lunch situation is where we've had the most concern. And again, it's been a very small number of transmissions out of over 100 positive cases of students in our district that have been reported. There's been 3 or 4 where there could have been some transmission in school, and that all occurred with when masks may have not been fully up. Certainly at the younger levels where that's more of a challenge, and then also at lunch. So a concern is if you're at less than 6 feet and anyone has a mask down, now there's a vulnerability there. So we are awaiting some guidance on that as well as we make our plans and try to figure this out. I just want to share, and I will share later, some correspondence with the school committee that we received. But we had the Time on Learning survey from the state, and the Time on Learning survey from the state identified districts that may not, with their current models as designed, may not be meeting the requirements. This goes back a few months. And so many districts, because of that, had to start making changes to their model. So their hybrid model or their remote model was not meeting the state requirements. And so many districts were developing plans and getting them pre-approved by school committees to change their models and to bring in more folks because they were dismissing too early or they were having too much asynchronous time. We always met, our model and our design always met, our hybrid model always met with the highest standards. And so we did not have to have those models. And so some of the districts that have already announced changes and plans to bring folks back are doing that before they've seen the guidance from the state. And hopefully that, you know, I wish that that works very well for everyone. Where we are at this point is we are collecting data from families. We're going to get an announcement tomorrow from the commissioner. He's going to present to the Board of Education. And very soon thereafter, I'm hoping tomorrow, but maybe it'll be a little bit later, we will get the official guidance on what all of that is. That said, we can read between the lines and see where this is going. And so our principals have been working very hard already behind the scenes to try and prepare our classrooms. What most likely will happen tomorrow is the commissioner will talk about elementary school first, K through 5, that remote and hybrid learning is no longer acceptable for time on learning. I want to be clear from the outset, there will be a provision for anyone who chooses to remain in full remote, and that most likely will be folks who have pre-existing conditions or other vulnerabilities, who have COVID, who are in quarantine. They will be able to access the school, and that will be continue to be an approved method for learning at least through the end of the school year, June 30th. That's what will be clear. What may not be allowed is any other type of hybrid or remote. So there may be exceptions. Many districts are in very different places, but for elementary, there will be an expectation of returning to school in early April. And I'm not sure what that date is, and we will adjust and move from there. And as you know, for elementary, for us, we've had kindergartners in all year for 5 days a week, and that's not the norm. So we've had that already. We've been working all year to try to have first grade in. We've never been able to quite get to that place because the way we were able to do kindergarten, we had to use multiple spaces. So we were never able to replicate that for first grade. We are actually making some adjustments to kindergarten so that we're going to consider to try to, you know, we could possibly start bringing some of our younger grades in earlier. And depending on that timeline, we may, you know, our plan is to try to start bringing more students back as soon as it's absolutely safe. We would be comfortable saying that, you know, if the commissioner comes out and says that elementary would begin in early April, that would most likely be our plan as well. What I believe the commissioner is going to say is that there will be some flexibility with middle school and high school. My recommendation at this time, and I'd love to hear more from the committee, I think that our model lends itself to having middle and high school back as well. So I think that we can begin to discuss what that would look like. We may phase it in. We're going to come up with a plan that works well for us, for North Reading, that makes the most sense. But I think we all agree that the best place for our students to be is in person for their learning. We will support them when they're at home. There will be some changes, possibly, to what the remote model looks like. We've already had some concerns about, especially with some of the older students. We've had a separate high school forum where, you know, were students necessarily home for the right reasons, right? So it was designed for the students to be in remote to keep our numbers down, but we've had situations where there are 3 or 4 students in the class and 17 at home, and, you know, 8 or 9 of those that are at home might be there because, I'll just say maybe they overslept and they felt it was easy to work from home that day. That's really not what the design ever was for the model. The model was some students are in person, some students are at home, and if you're sick, stay home. So obviously if you're sick, that's a different story. But we do need to think about what that looks like moving forward because, at some point, if you're sick, you might have to miss the day. Like, we might have to go back to that kind of thinking because we do want to make our focus on the students that are in front of us. So we do need to think out some of those things, and no matter what comes out with the commissioner, we certainly have to bargain certain aspects of this impact on with our unions and make sure that we are in plan. But preliminary conversations that we've had, I think we all have a common goal, and we're going to work together on that. So that is not really a concern, but it's certainly something that we still need to continue to work on. So I wanted to share some of the results of the survey that we have put out. Again, very different from the original survey. Things have changed. Now, let me just share a little bit of where we are. So some of this we will come back to later in the evening, but this first item is about a return to full in-person. And the question is about, I want to be clear as well that in the survey, we didn't give the option about remaining in hybrid. We did that on purpose because that may not be an option. It may be, some may need to be in full remote and others would need to come back in person. So with those two options out of the respondents, and we had, at this dipstick, I see 1,162 responses, which that covers a good amount of families. We have about 2,500 students, a little bit less than that, and many of them have siblings. So 1,162 is a very high response rate. And we had about 400 within about 30 seconds. So I think people were waiting for this survey to come out. But as you can see, it's about 90% of folks have indicated that they would return full in person, and they're comfortable with that. There is, the one number in all of this that I'm a little concerned with, there is 10% that have said they would switch their child to full remote. So what that means is those are students that are right now coming in a hybrid that would go into full remote. So that's a fairly high number of respondents. I'm thinking that maybe with more information, those folks may be more comfortable coming in person. And if there is any option for anything in the middle, is some kind of hybrid, then maybe they would stay there. Mr. Buckley.
One quick question on that. So was the survey sent to everybody or could this have been people that are full remote right now that were filling that out?
This question was only sent, so this was disaggregated by cohort. So this is A, B, and C answering this question. Yep. The second question is specifically for those with folks in cohort D. Now, the one place where it could be a little divergent is because I did say if you have any students in D, there are some folks with one child in D and others in, so, but we do have on this, 66% said that they would remain in full remote, but 33% said that they might send their children back if there was a plan in place. So you would get some students back from full remote. It's about, survey-wise, it's about 30, 40 families as opposed to 100 plus families on the other survey. So it'll be interesting, and that's one of the pieces we needed to look at. We will need to get some more actual data as we really try to figure out how to make this work. One thing that's been discussed, we want to be the least disruptive we can possibly be for students. I think if students either opt into full remote that aren't in there now or choose to remain there, at elementary, there's a possibility that their teacher may change. That's something that we've discussed because in order to prioritize the in-person learning, we want to keep those classes together, but we may have to find a slightly different solution for those that are choosing full remote. It's not ideal, but I think for the big picture, that might be the best scenario. So that's not official. That's not anything we've decided upon, but it's something we've discussed because we really do want to prioritize the in-person learning and at this time. So we will make, if that is the case, it'll be the least disruptive it can possibly be. There were some other items that we'll talk about a little bit later, but I will just share now that with the school start times, we had some questions there as we talk about the calendar later and school start times. There was a good amount of support. You can see it's almost 90% who, 30% in favor of the change, and then a large percent, 63%, who are not concerned either way. This is really about trying to take the early and the late schools and keep them at the same place. I will say that if you don't have a child in elementary, you're probably going to answer that it doesn't affect you either way, right? But not a lot of people that are saying to stay with the current model there. And then the real question about the start times is below. 57% saying they're in favor of a change and would like to see it continue. And 28% saying it doesn't matter either way. And then there's 13% saying that we should revert to the previous schedule, which would have had the elementary schools starting later than the middle high school. More to come on that. There's a lot of work. We're going to talk about it later in the evening, but I will just say for those that are on at this point, nothing has been decided. We're going to do a lot more discussion and presentation at our upcoming meetings on this from our school start times committee. But we were able to, because one of the silver linings, I guess, of this COVID, we were able to do something, a sort of a pilot to see how it worked. And we got a lot of information from that. And one of the biggest outcomes that we're hoping is to have, as late a start time as possible for the elementary schools. And also, if we can try to get those 3 schools on the same schedule, that's a real bonus for the district and for families and for teachers. And so we're hopeful that we have a plan that could do that. We're still examining all the data, and that is really why the busing questions that are also on here are very important to have that information. So although it was sort of non-binding, getting that information, about 50% of the people who completed the survey gave us the busing information we need to make some of those decisions for next year, because the numbers help determine how many runs we need to make and whether we can do that with the start times. And again, we don't want to build it just based on 1 year. We anticipate ridership may fluctuate a little bit next year as, we recognize that some people are working from home that may not be for the rest of their career. So we don't want to make a huge change that we think wouldn't be sustainable for multiple years. But we're fairly confident at this point that we have some creative solutions. So we'll have more to share on that later. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions about reopening, but again, just to reiterate, the Department of Ed has not given us the exact guidelines of which grades, which dates they're thinking, whether there are solutions. So one great solution to lunch is don't have lunch. Dismiss before lunch, and in the afternoon have some remote connection or something like that. That's still sort of a hybrid. It's a little bit different look to what we have now. That works better for elementary, I think, not so great for middle high school, where you probably have similar classes in the afternoons always in remote, right? Then you could talk about, well, do we start doing some kind of cascading where, a different class each afternoon? And that gets complicated in its own way, right? But we still don't know whether the department's going to even allow something like that. So for us to develop a full plan and publish it and say, this is what's happening, I think is a little premature. So our plan here is to see what comes out tomorrow officially, see what comes out from the department. We've been told that most likely by next Wednesday we will have that lunch guidance. So I think by the middle of next week and into the end of next week, we're going to have to make a decision. Either we're going to develop our plan based on the DESE guidance, or we're going to say the DESE guidance hasn't come, we need to develop our own plan, in which case we will. But either way, we're looking at bringing back elementary students certainly early in April, first week, second week of April. Middle school, high school, whether it's around that time frame or maybe a little later, maybe after the break. That would be my recommendation at this time.
Thank you very much. The light back in the middle. So I'd love to hear from the different committee members on what their thoughts are. Chris, since you're not here, I might call on you first, so we don't lose you in the discussion, but do you have any thoughts on, any questions for Dr. Dale or any thoughts?
A couple comments. I'd like to echo what Dr. Daly said. It's in that the primary goal really has to be getting as many kids back in for in-person learning as we can while still making sure that things are safe. I hope that's a fair paraphrase, Dr. Daly, but that seems to be the that's the goal of our mission of educating. I'm glad to see any progress going in that direction. The concern I have is really just that right now it seems like there's a push and a pull where the state is pushing us to get back in person and has stated that under 6 feet is okay, but as I understand it, the CDC is still advocating for 6 feet. So I can understand any parents that feel confusion about that. I feel a lot of confusion about it myself, and I'm not sure how to resolve that. But nevertheless, provided the things are safe, getting kids back into school is the best thing for families and the best thing for kids, of course.
So the CDC did say up to 6 feet. They did change that a little bit. And they said especially if the district is in the red. Now, their definition of red is a little bit different than ours. It's based, I believe, more on county data. Again, it's a national assessment. But that's another reason why, out of the gun, we're not going to jump ahead into this. We are just coming out of the red as a town. And so that's another adjustment. But CDC has not completely agreed with what's coming out locally, but part of what's going to be presented by the Board of Education to the Commissioner tomorrow, I believe, is going to be a letter from many physicians and medical experts in Massachusetts that helps to try to close some of that gap, because locally that's something we've also wanted to address as well, or some of the discrepancies between DESE, DPH, and CDC at the national level. And so I know that that's something that they're addressing head on tomorrow at the Board of Education meeting at the state level.
Other committee members. Rich.
Yeah, I'll chime in. A couple of quick clarifying questions, Daly. First, at the very beginning of your discussion, you mentioned that a number of 65, somewhere between 65 and 70%, and I wasn't clear what that was referring to. You said something with 70% would or wouldn't.
It was the original survey, I think, about hybrid versus whatever.
That was the, and I didn't put that graphic up. That was the when I first did a survey a few weeks ago, I guess it was a few months ago maybe, the question was, would you be comfortable with your students coming back at less than 6 feet? It was really when we were getting a lot of emails on both sides, and I put it out there to see, and it was very much divided. It was mid-60s to 40s, so there was a lot of people that wanted to come back, and there's a lot of people that didn't want to come back.
And so the news is that the current survey is showing a definite trend towards being willing to come back.
Definitely in that direction. As I mentioned, there was no option on that survey to status quo. And I have received a few emails saying things are working well, why would you change it right now? And really what this Board of Education piece is, it really takes it out of, in some ways, takes it out of the control. If time on learning, if it is determined that hybrid is no longer counts, we can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's got nothing to do with, really, that piece of it is not even on the table because we can't offer that program anymore.
Yeah,
there will be waivers available, but we wouldn't qualify for that because of our, our status, our counts, our building, our all those.
And I think that's an important point that,
Yeah.
if we're going to follow the requirements of the department. There may be some other things that are recommendations, or we're going to try to get you to a certain place, but the requirements we're going to follow for sure. In the pool testing, do you have a sense of participation rate, or what kind of, how many people are participating at both the staff and the student level?
I can get the exact numbers for you. It's I'd say percentage-wise, it's a higher number of staff. It's very high. We did have, forgive me if I mentioned this already, but we did have some confusion, so I want to make sure it's clear. You need to register for symptomatic testing, and then you have to register again for pool testing. So what I did last Friday, I emailed everyone who was officially approved for pool testing, and then emailed the entire district the next morning and said, if you didn't get my email last night, you're not in. So I think that shook the bushes a little bit, and you got another 200 or 300. So there's, I believe, total staff and students close to 650 to 700 out of about 3,000 or so if you count all staff and all students. So, it's not everyone, and I think for some it's a question of they're focused on the vaccine now, less than on the testing. I think for some they don't want to take the time or subject themselves to the testing, but it's worked very, very smoothly. So you may see, as more folks do it, word of mouth, getting more folks involved.
Yeah.
And so each week we will extend it. There will most likely, I believe the original date was March 9th that you had to sign up. I'm trying to remember that date. I don't know whether that's been changed now. You know, in my mind, it's changed. I don't know if there's a new date established, but I do think at some point we will say no more registrations after this point. I think that some of the data they want is to see multiple weeks, and they don't want people just doing it for 1 or 2 weeks. But we will accept new folks and new entries, and I'll probably send out a reminder of that, and also a reminder on the survey to get some more information as well.
So there's really a lot of reason to hope that as we get into April, that the between the testing and the vaccinations that are going on, and it's unclear, it's completely unclear how quickly educators will be able to be vaccinated at this point, but it's going to be at least a month.
Correct.
And we understand that the return to school, the return to full-time is not contingent on vaccinations. At least the state doesn't claim that, and neither does the CDC. But it feels like as we get to April, we're going to be barring a complete turnaround in a much better place. We'll have more information. The case count should be way down, and hopefully people will feel more comfortable about returning to full. So I think we're on the right path.
I will just say that, you know, from what I heard from the governor the other day, they're going to, as many of these vaccines come available, they're going to try to get them into the hands of those that are on the list, and teachers are now on that list to make appointments. It sounds like at the end of the month, they're going to get a lot more. And at that point, it may also be 1 dose. And I'm getting a very good feeling, good sense that we could have every teacher that wants to be vaccinated by April vacation, let's say, certainly by that point. And so hopefully by that point, those that need their 2nd dose will get it. And a lot are going to, I think, take advantage. I'm hearing more people say, I'm going to just wait for the 1 dose and get it 1 and done, and I'm done. So we'll see, but that's optimistic. Again, I would have loved to have had it done very differently and have a very different plan, and we've advocated for that. I think I failed to mention that, you know, the town, as well as Mr. Bracey with the Department of Health, we've been trying to get either clinics in town through local pharmacies. We're still trying every day. I was reaching out to some different contacts today to just see if there's anything possible, and if we can't figure out any way to do this locally, we will. But they have just really not supported a supply of vaccines to the local, and it's really been pushed to the pharmacies, CVS, and to these larger distribution areas. So those are the options we have now. The governor mentioned there is infrastructure if we get more doses to do it in different ways, and we certainly will explore whatever option it is. It may be challenging. You know, I've mentioned it before that, you know, folks now are going to take whatever appointments they can get. We've discouraged them, obviously, staff from missing the day, but I can understand why. If you're nervous about this, you're going to take what you can get. And I think as a community, a school community, we're all going to pitch in and just realize that there might be days where there's a bunch of people that are out getting a shot, and we're going to cover for each other. And I think we will certainly get through it, but it's going to be an interesting pinch over the next few weeks. But I think we'll be, you know, I think this extension of the window made me feel better. That all will be spread out more as well. So,
Thanks.
Yep.
Hi. Diana?
I just wanted to, I know you alluded to almost wanting to get some feedback regarding middle school and high school. State's going to come out, most likely say elementary school possibly has some flexibility.
Yes.
I just wanted to give feedback that I think that's great that you're thinking about that, and I hope that's the direction that the district will go in, because I think there's value in that. I mean, as you guys all know, I was always an advocate of 3 feet and hoping for as much in person as possible. So I'm certainly an advocate of the plan that you, at least at this point, think you're going to be exploring. And then I was just out of curiosity, had a question, and I haven't really, I don't know what other, organizations and industries are doing just yet and how this will all play out, but I don't know if you've thought about it yet, but is it going to be required that teachers get vaccinated, or is it going to be optional?
Yeah, at this time, there's a lot of those questions out there.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that it's going to be a requirement
Okay.
for them to be vaccinated. I'm not even sure if it's a requirement for them to tell us that they've been vaccinated.
Yeah.
But we are going to strongly suggest both.
Okay.
If you are vaccinated fully, you no longer are a part of the contact tracing process. You no longer need to quarantine. There are many changes because of that, and so we do want that information. But there are some legal questions about whether it can be fully required, but it certainly is strongly recommended. And the sense that I have is that
Everyone probably will.
everyone's on board. But there will be, for many different reasons, people that may not be able to, or different allergies or whatnot. And so, to my knowledge, it's not a requirement at this time, but it's a great question that comes up.
Okay, thank you.
You need any thoughts? Okay, and then I'll ask. If anybody on the call has any comments, if you want to raise your hand, we'll call on you as well if you have questions. I'll just start by saying about pool testing, I appreciate how smooth it's gone. It was confusing registering, I will point out, because it took me a little bit of time to do that. But just for people that don't remember, the benefits of it, I think, are really important, because somebody might have COVID and not know about it yet. And so the earlier we can do it, there's fewer contacts. It's just a much more rapid response if there is somebody that's infected, which I think helps to contain it. And so I know my kids all signed up for it. They all did it. Very easy. It's not the really long stick. It's just a little Q-tip one. So it was actually very easy. So I think if anybody is listening and hasn't signed up, I really do think there's a lot of value in it. I think I want to start by pointing out that I think our hybrid approach has been working pretty well. And I think it's worth pointing that out. And I really appreciate all the teachers. Like, we've all heard the horror stories from other districts. Our teachers have gone out of their way to try to make this work. And so any of my comments is not saying that what's happening now is not working well. It is. As Rich kind of mentioned, DESE is mandating things. You see some school committees that are sort of getting on board to try to fight the DESE, and they're trying to organize ways to fight that. I don't support that. I mean, I think that if that's what the rule is, that's what the rule is. We have to abide by that. And as Diana said, I mean, I was in favor of as much in-person learning as we could in the beginning as well. I understand there's a trade-off if some students would be less than 6 feet apart at some times. I don't think that necessarily means 3 feet. It might be 5 feet for some kids, maybe 4.5 for some kids. It might be in certain classes, but I do think it's time to try to get back as much as we can. But I also see a big difference between elementary and high school, middle school, because elementary, I think, is going to be the one that's mandated. High school, middle school, I think the model, and I've been as reactive as anybody. I've annoyed Dr. Daly this week quite a bit, but I understand from the models that with high school, middle school, I think it's a lot easier for a kid to still be in hybrid and the class not really be that much different. Whereas in elementary, I think it's very different. And so even if we decided to, let the high school, middle school go slower, maybe you still have the hybrid approach, and that keeps the numbers down a little bit, because you heard Shivy say earlier, there might be some students that would rather be in hybrid still. To me, the point is trying to get the option to allow students back when they want to be back, if they want to be back. And so I think we should be moving forward towards that. But Dr. Daly pointed out, we need to know the guidelines of the plan. We need to work with the unions. We need to figure out the logistics of it, because, being able to be back in the class and being able to be back and eat lunch are two different things. And so, there's a lot to go, and I know everybody wants to push the gas and get an answer tomorrow. But I do know that from conversations with Dr. Daly that there are plans being made, and there's a lot of conversations going on. So I think everybody's pushing the same direction. But that's just my thought. Dr. Daly.
A couple of things. So, I do appreciate the choice in allowing students to come back. In some ways, just the logistics. We've even talked about, the physical movement. We are in the school tonight, so you guys are seeing some of this. The number of desks that are in the cafeterias that have to physically go back into classrooms and all of that, to phase some of that in is just cumbersome. Because depending on who chooses to come back, you might need 26 in one room and 15 in another. It's logistically much easier to do a Band-Aid and say, we're back, desks are out of the cab, desks are back here. So there's a lot, even quite honestly, like we've talked about, are we hiring outside help to help with this one big move and do it in one weekend or something? So there's a lot of things to consider. Something about middle high school that I didn't mention as well, we talk about senior events and all those things, and just having all those things that we talk so much about, that we're much more in the front burner as you get into late April, May, June with those upperclassmen, about having that time together as a class to do some of those things and to have those opportunities. I support. When we talk about, certainly don't want this to be the driver, but when we talk about MCAS testing, which is scheduled to happen, to be able to do MCAS testing with all the sophomores on one day as opposed to doing it cohort A MCAS testing, cohort B MCAS. I mean, you're now creating half as many disruptions for testing as you would otherwise. So not that that's a driver, but it's certainly a logistical thing that we're thinking about with secondary. And then the last part is just, I think we understand, how important it is to have our secondary folks back as well as our elementary. We're going to work with our teachers to make sure that it's done in a careful and thoughtful way. But we certainly want to have, I think that our model will work with bringing all those grades back. But we will listen to what comes out tomorrow, and we will think about, is there, what's the best way to do it with us here in North Reading?
Diana, I just wanted to add just one thing to consider as well, is that, the 6th grade transition here in North Reading is the most difficult transition that we have in our district. And I know just from personal experience that grade is struggling. And so even to get them back for a few months, that's why I'm an advocate for sure at the middle school. But I do agree with kind of all the things that are going to happen for seniors and in the high school. I just think there's a lot of supporting elements to consider there. So I just wanted to kind of raise that point.
Dr. Daly?
In my mind, if we can do it this spring, to give the kids a head start in the fall, I think is just, if we can do that. And I think, what I've heard from teachers is, we all know it's going to happen at some point. It's a matter of figuring out when and how to do it safely. So if we can do this safely and to give folks a head start, and there's going to be all sorts of conversation. I mean, kids are coming 3 days a week, most of the students. So it's not that big a difference, but it will be different to now see all of your class at once in person. I mean, there are some differences there, and there are going to be some students who have some questions, some gaps, some trauma, some things that need to be addressed. And the sooner we can do all that, the better. And anything that we do now is going to pay dividends in the fall when we come back, hopefully in the fall as well.
I 100% agree with that. And to work it up that way, elementary school and then 6th grade, you have to balance that a little bit with the lack of or maybe it's better understood than I just haven't read about it, but of the different risk levels between, and it's always frustrating when, I'd be interested to read this letter that you gave us, Dr. Daly, from the physicians. If they give us any information that the difference between elementary kids and high school kids is such a huge difference in age and potentially such a huge difference in risk of catching the disease and transmitting it. And so that's the only thing that you kind of, in my mind, that I worry about balancing, getting the correct balance right. But I think moving 6th graders is a great point. It'd be great to get those guys back for a couple months.
I'll say one obvious difference, and something maybe I didn't mention, just the numbers in the buildings, right? So it's not just having all the kids in, you're having 100% of the kids in the hallways, on the stairwells. And so our high school kids going to be more shoulder to shoulder just because they're a lot bigger? Yeah. It's harder to spread out. And so that's something we need to think about as we're in addition to lunch. It's also, how do we, maybe we're staggering some dismissals and entrance times and passing times so that there's just, we don't want to go from what's working. And that's what, quite honestly, with the data, we have seen low transmission, but we've seen low transmission with 6 feet of distance and a lot of physical space at all times. So I think what we need to just be careful of, and I appreciate these doctors that have said we've seen low transmission, and we've always said you could do 3 feet, and there's some schools that have done 3 feet, but to my knowledge, there's not a lot that have been operating at that level all year. I think many districts that are operating are at closer to 6, and I've seen those surveys as well. So it's worked well with those precautions in place. I think things have changed though, and I think that's the biggest piece. I think the rates are down, the transmissions are down. The more that we're able to go outside for classes again, I think with all that on the horizon, part of the lunch solution can be some outside time. It could be, certainly a solution with our music classes, our phys ed classes. I mean, they've been going outside for walks even in this climate. But I think once it's warm, we're back on the track, we're back on the field.
It never gets more.
All those things will open up, and I think, we're certainly feeling the light at the end of the tunnel a little bit. I'm very optimistic and excited about that.
Yeah, and it's clear that community, just the overall community transmission rates have a big impact on this. So
They certainly
if they're down, that makes a big difference.
I mean, and the only other thing I would say is that I think what's coming out right now is there's a lot of it's becoming political. It's becoming, we're being ordered to do it by the commissioner or this or that. But our objective in this room and in this district is to focus on the kids and what's in the best interest of the students. And I think we've all said the entire time that in-person learning is the preferred way of learning. And so we would rather have in-person if we can. That's what we're trying to get back to. We do have a hand up. So Alexis, if you want to unmute. Alexis, are you here? Hands down now, maybe.
Lower the hand.
Lower the hand.
Use the chat.
Yeah, you can also chat if you have a question you want to type in or something.
I would just say, my suggestion too, we would give at least a week's notice if there was a change to the schedule. And it would be, preferably more, but we may phase in, we may try out one grade and then some others, so we give folks notice. But again, we would not see it being all that disruptive, because it's going from 3 days to 5. It's not like we're going from remote to full in person, right? So it's less severe a change. They are asking their raising their hand.
Yeah, okay. Alexis, can you unmute?
Yep. Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
Great. So this is her husband, Ernesto. How are you?
Good,
So,
how are you?
good. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
So the first one, I guess, just academically from a student body perspective, if we think about 2019 and where we are today, I'm going to not think about 2020 per se, but how are the kids in comparison if we were to compare, let's say, a third grader of 2019 to a third grader today, would they be at the same level if we were comparing a month, like for the month of March, right? And my gut tells me they're probably not. And is there any thoughts or concerns or plans on how to potentially catch up, if you will?
Can I answer that? Yeah, so academically, I'll answer that first. We're prepared for some learning gaps and some social-emotional gaps. I will say that our hybrid model, as Mr. Buckley said, has been working as well as it could possibly be. And we've conducted standardized assessments. We've conducted, check-ins with teachers. We are not seeing drastic, we're not hearing from teachers that, by this point in the year, by March, the third graders are usually at this point, and this year they're behind. We're not hearing that at all from our teachers, from our AP teachers to our third graders to our first graders. I don't think anyone's saying it's exactly the same. I think there is a little bit of a gap, but there's nothing that's very, very concerning or alarming to our teachers. And so we've frequently checked in with our staff about this, and we're not seeing those huge academic issues. We do think that whatever gaps are there will be made up, and we certainly will be, addressing that as needed in the spring and into next year. I think the social emotional piece, I think you're seeing more. I think you're seeing more of it, students that aren't connecting in the same way, I'm seeing it with my own children at home, that they're not seeing their peers and their friends as much. My children are hanging out with their younger siblings more than their friends, and you're just seeing some differences. I think that will start to improve as they come back to school, and hopefully as they get to perform, concerts and sports and all that as well. But we are not, as a district, that concerned about the gaps. We certainly are aware of them. We're certainly going to work at them, but I'm not saying they don't exist, but we're not as worried about that as we thought we may be because of this scenario.
And the one thing that I will add in before we go to the next question is if you stay around, to try to keep you to stay in this meeting longer, but when you look at the budget we're facing, you know, we're trying to propose a budget later today, and you'll see a direct link between some of that. A lot of what we're trying to propose are to impact things like social emotional learning. There's, again, increased reading specialists. There's a lot of things that we need in this district, and so the budget relates to that. And it all comes together. Like at the last meeting, we were going through school improvement plans, and we were looking through that, and we saw that, you know, there was a gap in reading, and I know that from the budget, part of that is addressed in that. And so it all kind of comes together where when we do see something, we do try to specifically address that issue. And you'll see if you stay around for the budget, it's specifically called out the positions that we think we need in this district to address those issues.
I'll just also say that, you know, two things. One, for some students for whom this is not working, they have more needs than ever before. We're certainly prepared for that as well. I know that remote, hybrid, whatnot is not working very well for everyone, and for those students, there are certain needs. So I'm speaking, when I was speaking about the successes, that's really for the total body, but those that are in need are in a lot of need. And very often those students are maybe not the same students that have needs when we're in full person. Some students have adjusted differently to being in remote. And I just want to say that, you know, our teachers are really to thank for that. Our model allowed and our teachers embraced, for the most part, a lot of connections and live synchronous teaching and opening their classrooms up. And not everyone did that. Not everyone did it all the time, but I think most have done that. And I think as the year went on, more did that. And I think that embracing that philosophy allowed us to teach very much what we always taught, just in a slightly different way, as opposed to, you know, having students do packets or things at home. And when I referred to that earlier about us not having to adjust our time on learning, it's because of the way we approached hybrid, and that's really not the way it was everywhere, and it's in large part due to what our teachers were able to embrace.
Okay. Yeah, my second question, it should be pretty straightforward, but as I kind of think about potentially the kids going back, you know, next month or two, if you will, and things somewhat feel normal and we go through the summer and we come back in the fall, it sounds like there's a lot of thought that's being put into academically what the fall is going to look like. But as I fast forward a little bit forward into the winter, you know, as we think about just a simple continuity plan, how are we thinking about preparing parents potentially if we had to go into some type of a hybrid mode if there was a spike? I think just, you know, I'm thinking from a communications perspective, is that something that parents need to think about, where, you know, parents are starting to plan, right, as we think about the fall and everything else. How is you know, this, you know, the committee and everyone else thinking about that, just not only internally but from externally, like a parent perspective as well? Is that something that's being thought about, spoken about? Does that make sense?
It does. I will say from where I stand and from the meetings I'm in with superintendents, with the commissioner, and if you want to say where I was last May versus now, last May we were talking about the upcoming school year and having to be prepared for everything. We're not hearing that now. I think there's a high, you know, the vaccine is proving to be very effective, not only against the current strains, but also other strains. The real move now is to get everyone vaccinated, and I think there will be some concerns going into next year, but I'm not hearing at this point that we need to be planning and bracing for possibly having to go to remote at some point next year or to hybrid. That said, I think none of us ever saw this coming, and now that we've been through it, I think we have a blueprint that if we start to get any indication that something else, whether it's COVID again or COVID, you know, whatever the next COVID 21 is, right? Hopefully that does not happen for another 100 years. But if it does, I think we're well prepared to do that. and we would give as much notice as possible to do any kind of preparation.
All right, great. And the last one should be pretty easy. As we're thinking about next month and we're going into April, spring break, is I'm assuming you're thinking about continuing to have April vacation, or is there any thoughts of potentially, if the school were to open, to kind of cancel April vacation? I guess just throwing that out there.
Yeah, at this time, we are not thinking about that. I know last year we played with the calendar a lot more in the spring because there was a lot of uncertainty to kind of power through to get our days in. We're in a much more clear place. This year we followed our calendar, we followed our breaks, and we followed our green goal schedule at the high school. I mean, our days and everything looked very much like a typical year. So I don't see that need. And the way we built our calendar this year with the breaks that we have taken is allowing us to be out by mid-June. So we're not up against the end of the year. And so I think that break in April is one that will give us some time to make some adjustments. And I don't see any adjustments to that this year.
The only thing I would add is I think a lot of teachers need a break. There's a lot going on, and if these changes are being made, I think when the plans are being made, the break will be incorporated into those plans. Whether it's just physically time to move things and nobody's here, or you try something out. I don't know. I just think that we probably need that vacation, so I wouldn't support changing it either.
Okay. Well, I thank you all for your hard work and everything that you guys are doing for us, for our kids and parents, and continue on doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, and great questions. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're done with the first item on our agenda. No more questions or comments? We're going to move on. The next thing is the school calendar. Dr. Daly, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So at this time, we certainly, as you know, we had many drafts of our calendar last year, even before we had to face all that we faced with this year. What I'm hoping to do tonight is to just get comments and feedback on this draft, and then to discuss and maybe be able to publicize and share out a potential start date. I think that's what people really are looking for next year, some start and end dates for the year. At this time, there is also no indication of any kind of change to the number of required days for next year. If you recall, this year, we only had 170 days for students. All indications are that we are back with those same number of days for next year. So we had discussed last year about looking at when Labor Day fell and making some changes. It was clear that the committee supported students beginning after Labor Day. There was some discussion about the possibility of teachers coming back early. So this calendar, another thing to just point out, at the end of the year, there's a holiday that is due this year. This year it falls on a Saturday, and so it's celebrated on a Saturday. Next year the holiday falls on a Sunday, and that's June 19th. It's called Juneteenth is the holiday, and so now that will be celebrated on June 20th. So that then is a day that we take as a holiday. We would not be open, and that would push our end date to the 27th with 5 snow days. And so one of our considerations, in addition to just, I think, the overall value of having some time with teachers before the students come back to address the learning gaps, the social emotional needs of students that are going to be coming back to school in the fall, to possibly have the teacher professional development day on the 2nd. So the suggestion here would be that our teachers would come back for professional development before the school begins. The 7th would be our welcome back day with all of our staff. Students' first day would be on the 8th. We would be returning to several professional development days. One thing that we're trying to do is streamline a little bit. We had, through this year, we've changed our elementary conferences from 3 afternoons or 3 days to 2. This calendar would continue that. We would still have the 3 release days, but one of them now would be professional development. So for the number of afternoons when students are not in school, that would be released, that would be decreased by 2. So we'd still have the same PD days, but we'd have 2 less conference days. And so this calendar proposes that as well. We would have a second full professional development day on election day, and the reason why we continue on election day is that is a day that many districts have to take because their schools are used for voting, and that allows us to do multi-district professional development. So we would want to preserve that date as well. So with those 2 days in the calendar and with the new holiday, it does bring our last day with 5 snow days to the 27th. And it preserves the vacation days and some other days as well. The Christmas, winter break, Christmas on the 25th, obviously Christmas Eve on the 24th, but the 23rd of December, this calendar does list it as a professional development half day, but that is actually not being recommended. So I guess this draft is a little bit off on that, I'm sorry. We made that change. But
so the 23rd is a full day.
23rd right now would be a full day, and the half day should be the first. So I think that might be a little bit different. Yeah, this one that got scanned in the packet is the first draft, and unfortunately you should have had a different one. It's just that slight change. But the overall, I just wanted to have a discussion tonight, and then maybe if we can at least approve the first day for students, we can then, I still have comment out from the, we consult with our teachers union and others for some feedback. So we're in an early stage, and we're a little bit later with this than we have been in the past. Part of that is because I wanted to see where we were and what it would look like, but I thought the feedback on the first day would be appropriate for tonight.
I have 2 questions. Nobody has questions first. So my only 2 questions are, number 1, would there be any thought to having both professional development days on the 1st and the 2nd of September, and then the first day for the students being on the 7th of September, or is that not something that's of interest?
So, as I mentioned, the reason, I would welcome that. The bigger reason is really that election day allows us for a lot of professional development, and it's something that we
No, I mean the start date, September 1st and September 2nd.
So
having a PD day on the 1st, and then the greeting day that
the
on the 7th on the 2nd.
I see. So keeping the PD day there. The discussion that we had last year that I recall was that people that are traveling on Labor Day weekend are planning it not on Monday and then being in school the next day, if I recall. So that we could certainly present that. It does contractually present some challenges because there are certain contracts that if you start before Labor Day, there is compensation then for Labor Day. And so that did happen this year, and we had to either pay that day's work or come up with a comp day. So we could do that again and come up with an arrangement. But I think the larger reason why we didn't put that in there was what I thought I heard last year was that the committee felt that if you're on Labor Day weekend on Monday, the idea is that that's the day and you're not going to school the next morning. And because that's what we've always done when we started after Labor Day, was you start on the Wednesday with students and the Tuesday with staff. But I'm willing to consider that if the committee feels otherwise.
I don't have a strong preference either way. I don't, if we start on the 2nd, if the students start on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I'm just looking at I don't think there will be, hopefully there won't be 5 snow days, but, June 27th is a very late ending date.
Yep.
And so that would just move it up to June 24th being the last day.
I'd love to get it to that week, yes.
And so I'm just wondering if that was the worst case scenario, that, you're getting out somewhere between the 20th and the 24th, I think would be nicer. And so the only way that I was thinking about doing that is if the 1st could count as one of the professional development days, students wouldn't be back till that Tuesday.
Yep.
But that was just my one thought. And then the only other question was, for snow days, I assume right now the guidance is it's going to be traditional snow days next year, that hybrid days won't work, or do you know that yet or not?
Everything we've been told is that was a 1-year allotment. I don't know what will be preserved from that moving forward. So that's certainly one of those things that we can discuss. discuss, first of all, what's allowed and then what we would do locally. But again, similar to the other scenario, the infrastructure is in place. You know, we have Chromebooks. Every teacher has a master's degree now in digital learning and teaching, and we could do that easily. And I think those days have been effective on, you know, I think having a traditional snow day has its place, but I think there's other days when we absolutely could be safer and be home and then not be here until late June. So I know we're going to be happy about the decisions, I hope, at the end of this year. Hopefully we're out of the woods with the snow, we'll see. But at this point, you know, we're going to be able to get out at least, you know, a day earlier because of the remote snow days.
Diana, question?
Oh, I was just gonna make a comment first to say that I think the calendar looks good. You know, I'm always an advocate of starting after Labor Day, and this depicts that, and I think Scott's talking about this too, but I think it looks good as is. This is just on my mind because my son is so good at saying, Mom, there's no half days in March this year. So I noticed there was one in this calendar. Did things shift around in terms of timing of professional development? Because I'm pretty sure it's like this year, there's nothing in the March timeframe, and I was just curious if there was any reason for that, and I'm sure it's nothing of significance. But I was curious. And then my only other, you know, and this is probably leading into our school start times, but I did see some magical start times listed down there at the bottom, so
Yep.
that were looking pretty good. So I was just curious if that was some of the thinking or if they were just placeholders for the time being.
So, some good questions there. Good Friday is the 15th, I believe, next year, April. We looked at that calendar this year with March, and quite honestly, I think a lot of us thought we might be in full remote at this point, and we would revisit that calendar, and otherwise we said, wow, this is we actually talked about, we have a PDA day at the end of the year this year, and we had discussions, do I come forward here and move that to March, and we get out a day later? We ultimately decided we're just going to power through with March. That was the calendar. There were some PD days in the calendar, half days that we moved. There was one in September. We did some shifts this year, but we ultimately just said, let's just keep moving through, and we'll get out a little bit earlier with the students in June. Okay. So we returned. I think when it's all said and done this year, you know, we got creative. We have the SAT day and those. So we had some of those things to build this year. But I think ultimately we probably had less professional development days this year than we typically do. Mm-hmm. And so we've resumed that for next year. Mm-hmm. Again, the December 23rd one is inaccurate here, so I don't know if there's another one missing. But the next draft will have it all very clear. But we typically, in the last several years, have had 5 half days and 2 full days, and that's what we would be returning.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then, was there another question?
Just the start days, and I know you'll get to
that. So, yeah, so my thinking there was, I wanted to get...
do you want to state what they are for people too?
Sure. And I'm sorry, I thought this was being shared. What's on this draft right now is just showing that the high school would begin at 8:30, which is, according to the science, and that's what we're doing this year, according to the science that's out there, that high schools are recommended not to start any earlier than 8:30. So would be about an hour delay on what most schools and what our schools traditionally done.
And the days are a little bit longer because this year the days were shortened slightly as well.
Sure. So the calendar's going to, the times are going to look different. The time on learning requirement of 170 days was shortened, as was the hours required. So that was a little bit different this year. So this is in here as a placeholder. So we took what we did this year, didn't change it completely back to the way it used to be, and we built in the longer days just to show what it could look like. And then if ultimately we decide that we're not going to continue with the start times, we will change that. But so this is not official. That's why I don't want the whole thing approved tonight, because there's other pieces. Middle school would be 9 o'clock to 3:26. Similar to what we're doing this year, obviously just a little bit later because the full hours are restored. Under this model, we are hoping to start the 3 schools at 8 o'clock. As I mentioned before, those professional development half days, when I try to bring the batch, Hood and Little, all the 3rd grade teachers together to discuss across the district, we have multiple different dismissal times. And so instead of getting a solid 2-hour block, you're getting less than that because of all the travel and the different times. That's just one benefit to getting everyone on the same schedule. The other, every 2 years right now, you switch with the early or the late school, and everyone's schedules are kind of changed. This is something that could certainly be affected that way. We're hoping through our buses, Michael and Sean Colleen and I, but especially Michael, has really spent a tremendous amount of time on this, looking at the bus contracts, the bus numbers, to determine that this could work. So we're not 100% there yet, but we're confident enough to put it there and to put it out as a possibility. You then would have some adjustments to the pre-K times, the full day kindergarten, and the kindergarten times to follow that schedule. And then obviously the dismissal times will be a little bit different. But I've said that Mr. McGowan has checked the almanac for us as well. He wants to, part of what we want to make sure with the earlier start time is that students aren't out waiting for a bus before it's light. We really want to be mindful of that. And I'm thrilled to see 8 o'clock. I mean, this year when we did the batch, when we got it to 7:45 as opposed to 7:30, which was the old high school start time, I was much happier. The fact that we're getting that much closer to 8 is fantastic. Might it end up being, 7:55 to, we might be playing a few minutes here or there. We're going to try not to, but we do have to time those bus routes to make sure that they work. So, but right now we went with sort of the clean round numbers, and I'd love some feedback on that too.
In terms of sorry, just to jump in, I have to follow up on this one. In terms of the bus cost, I believe the bus is all based on how many buses you have.
Yeah.
So even if you only do 3 runs instead of 4 runs, it doesn't change the cost at all, does it?
It doesn't.
Okay.
We've talked, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Good question.
Okay.
What we're discussing is what that looks like if you take multiple runs or if you have more students on the bus. And we've got some preliminary feedback from our Start Times committee about that, from some elementary parents who've shared, and then we would share that more with the community. But I think at this moment, we're leaning towards maybe having some more runs.
Yeah.
And then what that means is there's a cost now.
We can do more runs and it doesn't cost us any more. So,
Right. And you need to have less students on the bus, and the students on the bus for a shorter time. What we would then need to do is anticipate a cost of those students who aren't on the bus. What are they doing, right? They might have some activities at the school that's monitored by someone earning a stipend. So there's a cost to it. But I think right now that might be what we're thinking, but there's also the possibility of maybe we structure the runs differently with more students on them and they take a longer run. But either way, our goal is to get them back to the next school on time. So we're trying to sort that out. So we're going to do everything we can to make that happen.
Certainly the ridership drives a lot of that. And that's why that was part of the survey. Even before we did the survey, we were looking at numbers from 2019-20 this year. It was going to be maybe an average of 2. But the survey results will be helpful when it's starting to come in. That's been a very good response very quickly, so that's been helpful. But certainly, I think it's certainly feasible. There's some challenges to it, but I think it's feasible. And we do, based on the contract, have access to the 10 buses right now worth the day. So whether we do, 3 runs, 4 runs, the 2 tiers, 3 tiers, multi-runs or shuttles, we have the access to the 10 buses. So we'll be looking at multiple. Sure. Try to make it work.
Yeah, and in terms of, when you said you wanted feedback, I love it. I love if all 3 can be at the same time. I like the way the times are right now. I think that, middle school being the latest probably makes the most sense, although my only question would be on like JV, because if you have JV sports, don't they usually go before the varsity sports? And so they would be, my only worry about that would be if the JV's the first game and they're the last one to dismiss, if the schedules would work out, but.
Middle, JV would be high school.
Yeah.
What was that? Oh, JV is still high school.
JV is still high school.
Still not 8th grade, okay.
I will, I guess we should just talk about start times now that we're kind of discussing both items at the same time. Shivani's points are good. I think those are some good points. One thing I will point out about the sports is that a lot of schools, new reports making this change, as more schools make the change, some of the coaches have said, some coaches have said they have concerns. Other coaches have said, we're sometimes waiting at the field for another school to get there anyway because they're on a later start time. We are going to see this continue. One of the biggest concerns, there's always going to be people that are inconvenienced on either end, that it doesn't work for their schedule. That's always going to happen. But I think the biggest concern is, will this work? What are the implications? How's it going to work? I think by doing it this year, through everything else being up, in an upheaval, and by piloting it, you never have an opportunity to pilot something like this in a traditional year, right? So we're able to do that. I think people have seen that it's working. We've seen some of the benefits. And I think the biggest question usually is with elementary folks, how's it going to work? And I think some of the feedback I've received in the open comments on this have been that the elementary students have done well, but please try to keep it as close to 8 as, but that's what's been said. We don't want them super early, but a lot of the kids are up and they're ready to go to school, and that might affect some people that need it. We've certainly seen an impact of before school programs. We may need more after school programs. So we may see some shifts there, but there's still some of those needs. So.
Rich, do you have
no, not about this. I mean, other than obviously I've been supporting this idea for a long time, and there are no silver linings really for last year, but at least we can take something from that and make some good out of it.
Before we do a vote, the only other thing I was just going to add in here, and this is a weird thing, but I was going to start earlier with this. A couple people have reached out about not knowing when school committee meetings are. I just thought it would be worthwhile just to say when the next meeting is while people are still on it. And so the next school committee meeting is on March 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And the main attraction then will be the middle school presentation.
And on the main district website, there's a calendar. Everyone can download it. The meetings are there. The links to the meetings are there. Under the school committee tab is a document that lists all the meeting dates with hyperlinks to the meeting and recordings of the meeting. So I did send that out as a video, and I'll do that again as well to make sure people see it, because it's in several places as well as on the town side where they're posted.
I think we've just been going back and forth between Mondays and Thursdays. So a lot of time they say slashed, and so
they do in advance. But when we approve at the end of our meeting tonight, we will approve like the next 3. So I've always approved 3 out. So 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks, 3 meetings in advance. It's definite on the date.
Okay, so there's no more comments on the school calendar. So do we want a motion to approve the second as it, or do you want to think about the first as well to move it up that? I'm just worried about the 27th being the last potential day of June. I don't care either way. I mean.
So I was just going to, I meant to say, when you talked about, what we talked about last year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the bigger concern was when we were talking about possibly moving before Labor Day. And I think we're all in agreement that that's kind of a non-starter.
Yeah.
For students coming back before Labor Day. I think the Tuesday after Labor Day is a little bit more negotiable if we feel like it's really important to get that extra day. That's my feeling. I mean, I'm not managing that schedule anymore, so I don't know how you guys feel, but how you feel like the rest of the community would feel. It feels like it's more negotiable.
To me, I think it's about the educators, if they want the 1 or 2 days, if they want the orientation after Labor Day, so they have an extra day before they come back, or if they'd rather do the 2 days and be able to be out a day earlier. I would leave it up to them, but.
What I've heard anecdotally is the preference is there. I believe that the teachers union, our largest union, would be comfortable coming back prior to Labor Day. Again, contractually, they're not coming back before the 1st of September, but if it schedule looks like this, they'd be open to that in order to get out earlier in June. That is what they said. I think it was said, and it may have been, not the committee, but I remember someone saying last year, if it's Monday and you're up in New Hampshire and you're doing a barbecue, the thinking of starting after Labor Day is you're not getting up, driving home, and getting up the next morning. So I'd rather just discuss that now than change it. So, but if the idea then is you are getting in the car, driving home for school on Tuesday, that's different. So what does starting after Labor Day mean to you? I guess that's sort of the discussion.
Rich is correct. Like, I've always been, the strongest point was to start the kids after Labor Day. That's always what I've had a strong suit on. But, you know, and I certainly can waver either way, but I do think that Labor Day is a holiday of traditions, and I feel like a lot of people do go to somewhere in New England or something similar. And I think it would be fine to come back on Tuesday and have them plan for that. I don't think that's the end of the world, but I think, you know, there are going to be some families that wish they didn't have to rush home and kind of leave their Labor Day in the middle of it. And then the other thing that I keep in the back of my mind is, yes, I know it's not set in stone, but there is still that possibility that we can have some remote snow days. So is that mitigating the impact at the end of the year of those 5 snow days? I mean, think about this year, we had 1 snow day. So I kind of think about it from that perspective and think maybe there might be some flexibilities there too, to allow for that. But I'm not 100% adverse to moving it to Tuesday. The more important piece to me was starting after Labor Day like I did.
Did I address all the concerns? Sorry. Did I address all the concerns financially about doing it before, or do you think that, because we could possibly do some kind of compensation, right?
Yeah, I think you did.
It's not a huge concern.
No.
Yeah, okay.
We see you, Chris. Well, actually, Janine sees you, but she yelled at me. So, Chris?
I'd just like to agree with Rich and Diana, particularly with what Diana just said. I think that it's a nice tradition to be one of those towns that starts after Labor Day. I think people count on it, but I agree that when it seems appropriate, starting the day right after Labor Day could be the right thing to do, depending.
And I guess the other question is, would you make it changeable depending? I mean, this is the second worst calendar, right? Last year was the worst calendar, coming at the very latest possible day, and so that's the year that you might want to do it. This is the year you might want to do it. Maybe next year and the year after, it doesn't matter until it switches back. So I guess that's the other point. Do you want to move it back and forth, or do you want to set it and forget it?
Yeah, I think I would say we could have that flexibility that when Labor Day is earlier, maybe we do start on the Wednesday, you know, but for this year where we're trying to get out in June, and I would say give people as much advance. If we're saying the 7th is the first day for students, then we let people start to know now, and they plan some Monday meetings on Sunday, and they know that now. So that's kind of why I want to get it out there soon.
So once again, the educators would be okay with it, or you would have to discuss
it
with them?
Again, I haven't shared that with them, so I would want to share. So maybe
Can you hold on it?
I'm fine holding it to the 22nd. I think everyone's plan. I mean, you still can't go out of state right now, so I think people's plans. I think people have learned to be a little more flexible. So that was why, you know, I didn't want to get all this approved, and then who knows where we are. So I'm more than fine just having a discussion tonight and bringing it back on the 22nd.
We're going to have to approve other things anyways because it's not quite correct. So I think we can do it all.
It certainly would just be the start date is what I'd be looking at for tonight. But
But
I'm fine.
at least families can know it's probably going to be the 7th or the 8th at this point.
It's after.
It's not going to be.
It's after Labor Day for students.
It's after Labor Day for students.
And for the educators, again, we're open to whichever they prefer. Do they want to get out a little bit earlier? And again, I agree. It's probably not going to be the 27th anyways, but I feel like once you get to mid-June, you just want to be done. So.
Can't wait for days when we're in vacation.
And of the 15 or 20 people who are still on the meeting, I don't see a big backlash. So that's going to be worth some information.
I'm just looking at Mrs. Cap, so she's not giving me a thumbs down yet. So.
So we'll just have a discussion tonight, and then we'll bring it back on the 22nd. Sounds great. Perfect.
Okay, so no motion on this one. School start times we've kind of get into already, but
Yeah, I'll just give a very quick overview. You know, there's some items here shared that we have. You know, again, a great group of folks that have been meeting proactively on this for several years. Mr. Colleen, as the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, is sort of leading this group, and I've been a part of it. Mr. Connolly's been a part of it. Mr. McGowan and several parents and Nicole Pierce, who's a teacher as well as a parent, has been a part of it. So The timeline that we're operating under, as you can see, we are looking to have an initial school calendar discussion tonight. We're hoping to have more detail around the busing. You know, we are, as we've discussed, this is a good year for this because the bus contract is up. The contracts, you know, teachers' contract is in negotiation, so there is obviously impact to start times that we would need to discuss with all of our groups to make sure that the impact is understood and then to discuss what the implications would be. But I have had some preliminary discussions, and some preliminary feedback has been that there was support of the start time change. So I have not surveyed staff with some of those same questions that went out to the community. I will be doing that, as I mentioned, with students and also with staff. But we would want to start some of those impact discussions soon. We are trying to schedule some type of parent community presentation about the benefits. I think folks are certainly more aware of it than in the past, but Judith Owens is an example of someone who's an expert in this area that we're trying to coordinate with a parent night. If we're not able to get something scheduled live, we may host something ourselves and show and share. There's just so much out there from other communities, and just, you know, a few minutes of watching those videos and understanding the benefits will really go a long way for anyone that has questions about that. But we've been proactive in sharing that out over the last couple of years, so I think that the community is educated about it, but I think there's still some additional steps to take. We would like this is one of those split dates, whether it's the 12th or the 15th, that we're going to figure out for our next meeting. But at that meeting, the committee would like to present to the school committee, the start times group, with some of its findings and suggestions for next year. And around that same night, then we would have a final vote of the calendar with the times fully adopted. Does that seem like a reasonable timeline?
Yeah.
So we could still establish the start date next week, but obviously the little right-hand corner, as Diana pointed, would need to be solidified through this process.
My only two quick comments on this one. Number one, for the people coming to present, I think you already have a yes, so don't oversell if you already have a yes. And then I think most people are here in support of it. And then the other question is just about attendance. Have you seen any changes with attendance? I mean, do you see more high school kids that are on time now because it's later? Do you see any issue at the elementary with kids being late, or have you seen any shifts in that? Because I just know from talking to Mrs. Imbriano that her kids are always late.
Yeah.
No, that was me. When I was young, I was always late.
I'm just wondering if there's been any attendance changes. And again, I know it's COVID year, so it's a little bit odd, but
it's a little bit odd, yeah. It's a great question. I think we don't have anything more than sort of anecdotal, but you know, Dr. O'Connell, especially at the middle school, has just expressed time and again to me the benefits that she's seeing. And teachers are saying to the principals and to myself directly, kids are more awake and alert in those first period classes. So we're hearing that over and over at the secondary level, and we're not hearing at the other level. Other than, I think the bachelor being the early school, we have heard some pushback from that just being certainly inconvenient, maybe a little bit of a challenge for some of the kids getting up and getting ready. But I've honestly heard so much more positives about this from the students and from the staff. And I think what Shivani shared as well is there are some concerns that students have, but there's certainly positives far outweigh the negatives from what we've experienced. And that's really what you're hearing from other districts that have done this as well. So very, very similar. So I don't have the actual attendance, but that's something we can look into a little bit.
okay. Any other thoughts on start time? Okay, the time we've all been waiting for. Mr. Connolly's most important meeting. So I'm going to move this because you're a little quiet at times, Michael. I don't have that problem, so I'm going to just move the mic a little bit closer to you. Whenever because they have a hard time hearing me.
Is that me?
Is everyone seeing my? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you get it.
All right, behind you. Sorry about that. I unmuted myself and I shared by accident. Okay. So
We can't see your screen.
uh,
You want me to share, Michael, or?
oh, sorry. Let me try to do that again. Okay. Okay, so essentially we're going to try to walk through the preliminary FY22 budget, as we typically do at this time of year. So at this point, the committee's kind of received their FY22 preliminary budget book. So really the purpose of tonight is kind of to walk through the highlights and to go over kind of the numbers, get into some discussion, but this is really the beginning of the FY22 budget development deliberation process. So we're going to try to cover these main agenda items. We're going to talk about some of the budget challenges that we are facing this year. We're going to talk about the main budget drivers that are driving the FY22 budget. We're going to go over the budget priorities by both the administration and the school committee and get into the numbers at that point, break down kind of where the funds are being allocated. We're going to talk about some of the new initiatives, the staffing positions, and driven by our strategic plan, as well as new initiatives in part related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk a little bit about our revenue offsets and our budget subsidies and talk about things that are outside of the general fund requests that the town supports, the appropriation, but certainly everything that sort of works in tangent to create the overall experience for the North Reading student. And then just in conclusion, sort of what is sort of the budget represents, and we'll have some closing comments. So we get into the challenges. So certainly when you look at any kind of school municipal budget, there's always this tangent that's at play where you're sort of beginning with a structural deficit right from the outset, and that's kind of the biggest challenge when you look at the macro level of funding a school budget. Certainly items like we refer to as fixed costs, and that is health insurance, general liability insurance, retirement costs, other benefit costs like workers' compensation, life insurance, Medicare. All those annual increases certainly tend to escalate at a far greater rate than the annual revenue that's coming in to fund the appropriation in the budget from year to year. So if you look at that first bar graph to the right, the top bar graph, you can see that over the last 7 or 8 years or so, this certainly this dynamic at play. Our fixed costs for all, the biggest amount of that is health insurance and other benefits and other areas that kind of come off the top before the revenue gets allocated between the school and the municipal budget. Those fixed cost increases are really growing at a far greater level than the revenue, which is made up of certainly, state aid is a part of that, local property taxes, local receipts like excise taxes, licenses, permits, certain fees. We all know property taxes are capped at 2.5%. So there's certainly a limit to some of the revenue when we start this process, and that revenue grows at a lower percentage. So you start out the process with this structural deficit, and that's always from a macro level a pretty big challenge. The school department has revolving accounts, has other special revenue accounts that we certainly all use to make up and to fund our entire request. So there's a limit to that type of revenue that we can bring in on an annual basis. So our federal and state grants tend to be relatively flat. Most of those grants have been entitlement grants. We have some new grant opportunities, which we'll talk about because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and some emergency relief grants that we're looking at, that we had this year, and that we're looking at some available federal grants for next year related to COVID-19. But some of those revolving accounts, the user fees and the tuitions we charge for some of the optional programs are fairly limited or been fairly flat. So that's a challenge that we work with every year. And then our contractual obligations, certainly, I think it's when you look at a school department budget, it's always salaries make up the largest piece of the pie, and that's the case this year. Salaries make up 83.7% of our total budget request, and that's a pretty typical statistic when funding a school department budget. So these kind of contractual salary obligations from year to year to fund really relatively modest, cost of living adjustments to meet these contractual obligations with our staff, our existing staff, is always makes up a big piece of that annual required increase from year to year. And then certainly we've talked about the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact on the educational process this year and some of the challenges as we look towards not only the spring, as we look to reopen and go back to a full in-person model, and we look to it next year in the fall. There's still so many variables and unanswered questions. Hopefully we'll get answers really soon and be able to trial some things this spring. But we do know there's potential of a lot of new costs that could arise. There's still a level of uncertainty. Certainly the impact on some of our special revenue programs, the things that we charge fees for, athletics, extracurricular, busing, some of the optional tuition-based programs for full-day kindergarten and half and full-day preschool. There's still some level of uncertainty there of what would the participation be at and what could that impact in terms of the revenue. And that does have, as you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, an impact on our general fund request as well. When we look at our revenue sources, just really quickly, again, no surprise here that a community like North Reading, the biggest piece of the pie from the revenue coming in is from local property taxes, making up over 73%. Our state aid, which is Chapter 70 and unrestricted local government aid, makes up the next largest piece of the pie. Again, North Reading is very, generally very flat state aid. It doesn't change very much at 12.6%. Some of the local receipts on the town side that I spoke of earlier, again, generally very flat at about 7.3%. And then these are our revolving accounts, which is the federal and state grants and some of the fees that we do collect, like busing, athletics, extracurricular are the main ones. We do charge rental income as well to rent school space, which is again been impacted by COVID-19 virus, make up the next piece of the pie. So that's just from a larger picture, certainly the revenue breakdown that's coming in to fund the school department budget. When we look at our budget drivers, our main budget drivers for fiscal year 22, there's really four main budget drivers at play. And the first is our contractual salary obligations. I spoke of that earlier. Personnel services and salaries make up 83.7% of our FY22 level service budget request. Again, it includes the cost of sometimes step advancements, lane movements, other contractual increases for staff. So when we look to kind of fund what we know are those annual increases, already that's kind of a big piece of the pie. We need about 3% of an annual increase over fiscal year 21 to fund some of those known contractual salary increases. When we look at our operational fixed costs, these are fixed costs to continue to maintain our buildings, our 4 school campuses, various contractual lines like just HVAC equipment, plumbing repairs, boiler repairs, grounds and landscaping, maintaining the wastewater treatment facility, our regular bus transportation contracts. Certainly, rates get adjusted every year, and things like our utility expenses, electricity, gas, water, certainly, phone services, all those things tend to go up every year. And to adjust the budget for some of these operational known increases is certainly always a big driver of every school department budget. Then when we look to this third item here, right, we refer to NRPS 2025. That is our strategic plan. The new initiatives that we're trying to improve the overall educational process in North Reading, as well as adjustments that we needed to make this year as a result of COVID-19. and that we see carrying forward into next year. So there were areas that we certainly focused on this year, and new positions that we brought in the current fiscal year. For example, a school nurse, some custodians to help with cleaning and touch point cleaning, certainly technology technicians to support the one-to-one program, which we had to really increase and ramp up from a K to kindergarten through grade 12. So those have been instrumental. We don't see the needs of those positions going away, as you'll find out a little bit later on in the presentation. And then certainly other needs that we spoke of a little bit earlier to address the social and emotional needs of students, to provide some academic intervention supports and additional tutoring needs, as well as some reading specialists, and other needs were needed as well. That is a part of our strategic plan. Special education costs, both in district and out of district, is always a big part of the conversation when developing a school department budget. The special education costs typically make up about 22 to 23% of your total budget request, and that is the case as we look towards fiscal year 22. So we actually are anticipating, at least on the out-of-district costs of special education, to go down next year. We are anticipating a decline in the number of students that would be educated outside the district, as well as we do anticipate that the state circuit breaker program, which is a program that does work to reimburse the district for certain special education expenses like out-of-district tuitions and transportation costs that qualify. We do anticipate that we'll have more reimbursement funds available next year. So those things are certainly at play. So those are the four major budget drivers. When you get into the numbers, I think you can really see when you look at our fiscal 22 total requests and how that compares to fiscal 21. I believe you can kind of look at these changes and increases and really see the four budget drivers I just spoke of at play. So we are looking at a fiscal year 22 budget request, which we're considering this to be a modified level services budget of $34,352,117. That is a little over $1.7 million increase over fiscal year 2021, or a 5.4% increase. These five major expense categories. You can kind of see the changes when you compare fiscal 22 to fiscal 21. Salaries are up 5.6%, which can be contributed to, as I spoke to earlier, a portion of that certainly in our fixed salary obligations to meet collective bargaining and contractual obligations with our existing staff, and then a portion of that is either a continuation of positions added this year, school nursing, custodial staff, technicians, and then additional staff driven by our strategic plan, and to really address the needs that we foresee next year to have really the largest impact on the students' educational experience. Instructional expenses are up 22.3% in this request. I think the largest factor in that increase is the result of the need to really increase our technology line items. We had to certainly increase our devices, increase our instructional software, in some ways to address the hybrid model and remote learning. But we don't really see a lot of those needs going away. We still think the instructional software that we brought in, that's become part of our curriculum, those have renewal costs to it. We have to kind of continue those services. Support of our one-to-one environment is going to cost some money from a network standpoint and from an infrastructure standpoint, as well as from a device standpoint. And many of the technology devices we added into the classroom, networking equipment, document cameras, and so forth, we see a need for. So that's really driving a lot of that instructional expense increase. From operations and maintenance, kind of a modest increase there, but again, that's to adjust the known increases to our building maintenance contracts, grounds contracts, wastewater treatment plant is certainly a part of that, as well as our utilities. Transportation, this is actually an area that, based on the most latest information and some of the decisions that we made at the last meeting, I do anticipate when we move through this process, there'll be an area of savings here. So right now we're looking at about 9.6% increase over last year. I think we'll see some savings because we had some favorable results of the bid. So this was a bid year, as you know, and I think we'll be able to reduce this line item as we move through this process because of the regular transportation contract rates came in pretty favorable when we went out to bid this year. From an out-of-district tuition standpoint, as I said earlier, we are right now anticipating a decline in the number of students being educated outside of the district, which I think is in part driving this reduction in this line expense category. The other piece is the circuit breaker piece, which is the amount of additional revenue we have through the state program as an offset. Again, I think the biggest area of sort of volatility or what is kind of the biggest variable, this is always an area that can change very quickly. So as we move through this process, we'll be looking at the latest information, and this is a situation or is a line item that could change very quickly. I just wanted I think everyone's kind of well aware that could be the case, but I just wanted to, again, remind everyone of that. So then we look at some of these pie charts, kind of where are the funds being allocated, how are the funds being spent. I mentioned earlier, salaries and compensation make up 83.7%. That statistic has really not moved in the last 10 years. It's very, very common statistic. You look at any kind of school budget across the state, across the Commonwealth, you're going to see that number be about 83%. So then when you look at what the remaining, breakdown from expense categories, and really if you look at an additional 16.3% or so of costs that are made up of expenses that I would consider are mostly fixed, and that's our contractual services lines, the cost of our utilities, the cost of transportation, the cost of out-of-district tuitions. These all add up to, over 13%. So when you add salaries and some of those known contractual fixed costs in those areas, we're really looking at a very small percentage of the pie, 3.5% remaining, that I would consider is more discretionary spending. And that's certainly classroom materials, supplies, textbooks, technology, professional development expenses. Certainly, areas we're looking to move forward, driven all by our strategic plan. So certainly we're trying to fund a $34+ million budget, but when you look at some of that beyond the fixed cost expense, we're really looking at a small piece of that pie, about $900,000 to $1 million, that is almost discretionary. It's about that 3% or so. And I think this chart does certainly indicate that. Another way of just looking at the pie and where the funds are being allocated, certainly instructional services is the largest piece of the pie, and that's certainly a good thing. The cost of our classroom teachers, the cost of our classroom textbooks, materials, technology, everything being spent to educate the students directly in the classroom, our specialist costs, directly classroom teachers, student support, personnel, paraprofessionals, certainly has the largest piece of that pie, and that's how it should be. Only 3.3% is what we call administrative or district leadership. So costs for business operations, human resource operations, administrative oversight. The 3.3% is less than the state average, which is generally about 4%. So we're doing a good job kind of controlling those administrative costs. Then about 9.8%, again, fixed operational, building, utilities, maintenance, grounds, snow removal, custodial, janitorial services, and then 4.7% in that out-of-district tuition cost number. So this is kind of just sort of gives you a good indication of how the funds are being allocated. So now we get into some of the priority positions, staffing positions, that we are, the administration at this point is recommending to the committee for consideration as we look to fund an FY22 budget. The first table here is what we would consider positions. Again, I spoke of these earlier, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. That staffing positions we added this year that were really to directly address new needs as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic that we think we're going to need next year. I think COVID certainly changed a lot, and these are 3.5 FTE positions that are going to be really have become a lot of just our everyday operation of what we do. And they're really focused in three main areas: continuing to support the health and safety of students, staff, the school community. Having this Florida school nurse has been instrumental this year. And we certainly know that that's going to be very much needed next year as we look to the future. We added a custodial staff to help cover the additional, lunch periods that were going on amongst 3 elementary schools, the middle school and the high school. That was needed. There's additional touch point cleaning, additional sanitation, disinfectant that's needed. We don't see that entirely going away. I know the science is changing every day. It could look different, but certainly this is the position we feel is very much important. It needs to be kind of that continuum of services next year. We really can't say enough of how important these data technicians have been. These are 2 30-hour-a-week positions totaling 1.5 full-time equivalent workers. They have been instrumental in the operation this year in terms of troubleshooting issues. Technology has been, as everyone knows, so important to one little thing goes down, it has a huge disruption to the educational process in the classroom. And these technicians have been instrumental in supporting the one-to-one environment, getting into the classroom, troubleshooting any type of issues very quickly, making sure there's working networking equipment, working smart boards, working technology to not kind of minimize any of that interruption. So that is really instrumental and certainly going to be needed next year. I talked a little bit about our offsets and our federal and state grants, and I mentioned that we have some additional offsets from the federal grant level because of COVID-19. So we have a lot of COVID-19 money this year because that we got very quickly, that we've spent the majority of that. When we look to next year, we know right now that we have something called SR2 federal money of about $210,000 that is going to be available really through fiscal year 2023. So that's all of next fiscal year, school year, and then the next school year beyond that. So we're trying to be a little strategic in how we spend that funding. Certainly, the way that funding has to be spent is certainly related to the COVID-19 virus. So these are positions that were added and to continue our efforts to provide a health and safe environment and to improve technology and to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So we had planned in this initial draft of the budget to spend half of that money next year in offsetting these positions added because of the pandemic, and then we'd have access to spend about half of that money next year to try to avoid that funding cliff scenario that we all speak of when we get an influx of one-time money. Those of you that were around in 2010, 2011, educational, we had that last economic recession area. There was a lot of that one-time money being funded, and districts were trying to avoid that scenario. So this approach would allow us to kind of just sort of, not potentially have to shift $210,000+ back into the general fund in 1 year. And then we look at our new positions driven by a strategic plan. I think it's certainly the focus on the social and emotional needs of students. We've talked about that earlier. Dr. Daly did a great job speaking to that. There were some great questions by parents earlier about where children's needs are. North Reading is not alone, that this is certainly going to be the biggest need and the biggest focus as we look towards next year and as a result of where children are from a social connection standpoint as a result of having some of those, those lack of student connections because of the COVID-19 virus. So we feel these 2 school adjustment counselors, one for grades K through 5 and one for grades 6 through 12, is really a pressing need for student support. Currently, there's only one full-time school adjustment counselor serving 660 students at the high school. These counselors, if funded, would be instrumental in addressing the student mental health and wellness needs of all students, K through 12. The role of the school adjustment counselor is extremely impactful one at the elementary and secondary school level. It will certainly, positions will allow not only for responsive services, but it's key in developing programs that are proactive rather than reactive. These positions would be essential in addressing, again, the social and emotional needs of all students, which certainly, as we all know, has been heightened due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So certainly, those are the highest of priority. And then this educational data specialist position would really support all administrators and teachers in using data to make more informed decisions. The position would serve as a coach and it would assist classroom teachers and administrators on the use of data from various databases, as well as various local data collection tools to help better analyze that data and then just make better decisions. They would also work in classrooms to work with groups of teachers and analyze grade level common assessments. They would guide teams of administrators in compiling data on student behavior, on attendance, on performance, to really connect that data to the educational process to help just better train and inform educators throughout the process. So a very important position. All three of these positions have been part of our strategic plan for a number of years, and I think it's fair to say they've been certainly reprioritized to the top of the list as we've addressed certainly the impact of COVID-19. Not shown on here just because we don't have a full-time equivalency attached to it, but we've certainly allocated funds for additional academic intervention tutors at the elementary level. So we've actually have remote learning specialists, remote learning aides currently working in the district that we added as a result of COVID-19 to help facilitate that remote learning process. That work in the schools each day, but they help facilitate the hybrid model. We would actually reallocate that to sort of academic intervention tutors, specifically at the elementary level, to help that any of those gaps that Dr. Daly spoke of early, try to address those very quickly on in the process and provide that additional academic support. There's additional increases to some existing staff for reading specialists, also kind of built into the budget request as well, to help certain schools in certain areas identify those students in need of additional support as quickly as we can. Yes?
Michael, sorry, I'll keep most of my comments to the end, but just one quick comment on what you just said. With the, you said we've had these positions for a number of years on the wish list, but the data specialist was actually a position that wasn't funded in the past, and that was a cut over previous years. Am I correct?
So correct, a little bit. So we kind of retitled the position. So we did have a sort of I think it was a data facilitator position, sort of certainly a little bit more involved in sort of state reporting and meeting our state report requirements. So this is shifting that and making it a little bit more kind of educational, a little bit more data analysis there, a little bit more coaching of classroom teaching. But the funding was there, and it's just kind of shifting this position to what the need is. Great question, though. So then we get a few more slides. I'll try to move quickly. So just really in summary, this is what the ask is: $34,352,117. Again, a little bit over $1.7 million increase. That's from the general fund, the appropriation request. As I spoke of earlier, the budget is made up of a lot more than that. To make, you certainly have federal and state grants. We have those revolving accounts. Those look to fund an additional $3.2 million. So when you really look at the whole picture of what's being funded, you're really at a little over $37.6 million. But then there are certainly other, as everyone that attends and is tuned into our monthly meetings, you're well aware that we accept a variety of school committee donations averaging about $250,000 on an annual basis. That's from our PTOs and our support groups, but also from private donors. About a month or so ago, we accepted a $40,000 gift from the International Church in town, and so we accept these donations, and that certainly helps provide the North Reading educational experience and improve and enhance that as well. And then our PTO and PTAs, their in-kind gifts and their annual budgets to fund enrichment programs, to fund class field trips, to fund technology replacements, and a variety of things that the PTOs do on an annual average of $75,000. All these go into work and make the full piece of the pie of what funding is going into the North Reading educational process. So again, just another way of looking at it between salaries and expenses and what the offsets are. Again, we're at $34,352,117. Just a little snapshot for folks that are just trying to understand how all the funding kind of fits in. You have the total funding requests, as I mentioned earlier, are really up to like $38 million. The general fund, which is the amount we go to town meeting for and ask for the town local contribution to support. This evening, we're presenting that budget to be a little over 34.3 million. So that's the local contribution, taxes, local receipts, and then state aid, Chapter 78, all help support that piece of the pie. And then our special revenue funds, as I mentioned, federal grants, state grants, our revolving funds, funds that we charge user fees for, and then the other special revenue funds like our gifts and donations. You can see some of the allocation of those as I just referenced on the previous slide. Here, just as a quick little snapshot, this is coming from the state radar data collection tools that are out there and available on the DESI website. FY20 available, wasn't quite ready to be published yet. But just to kind of shows you, again, the majority of our revenue, as you just saw on the previous slide, is made up of our general fund requests. Federal and state grants make up a smaller piece of that pie. Might be a little bit bigger in fiscal 21 because we have some of that SR, that emergency relief funding available. Revolving accounts from tuitions we charge, user fees we charge, rental revenue we take in is a little bit of a larger piece of the pie. And then when you look at our Chapter 78, which is the black line, this is what the educational process state aid that we take in from the state Chapter 70 program, really relatively flat. So not a lot of movement. It's been about $7 million. We're in a situation in North Reading where we're not going to see significant increases in state aid, so we can't really rely on that Chapter 78 to cover new initiatives and so forth. So that's been a relatively flat, very minor increases from year to year. And then the state obviously issues a required net school spending amount that we're required to spend. That's that white line. So we spend more than that. And I'll just say North Reading is really very much like every other community. The majority of communities spend about 25 or 30% more than what they're required to spend. And that is certainly the case in North Reading as well. This next chart just kind of shows you, again, some of these programs that we take in revenue from. Certainly bus transportation from the regular transportation process. Athletics, extracurricular, performing arts, kindergarten, and preschool. So this is what the user fee contributions, so parents often might wonder, I know I'm paying a user fee, I'm paying tuition, what is this money going to, what is it being used for? And it's really, legally we have to be used for that direct cost that the program is supporting. So this is what we kind of annually have taken in from the various optional programs that we charge user fee and tuition for. One area here that's highlighted is the kindergarten program. So within this budget request is a proposal that would permanently reduce the full day kindergarten tuition amount from $4,250, which it was last year, and it was adjusted this year for a variety of reasons, down to $3,500, and that's included the registration fee, everything involved would be a total full day kindergarten tuition of $3,500. So that would, cause a reduction in that offset that we've had previously. But again, the administration fully supports that. I know we've talked about it as a committee. It's been a long-standing goal by the school committee, a budget goal to try to reduce user fees and tuition costs over time. North Reading, unfortunately, is on the higher list when you look at what our full day kindergarten cost from a tuition is. I think we're up in the top 3 or 4 in the state. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where if we make a change, we don't get that influx of state aid income like some of the neighboring communities that have been able to kind of move towards more of a free full day kindergarten model, in previous years. So we would like to work towards that, and this would be our first step in doing that, as we would see that, and we would hope to sort of have some type of a phase-in approach where we would work towards having free full day kindergarten in North Reading. It's certainly financially unfeasible to do that all in one year, because it would cost about over $550,000 to do that. But we think a phase-in approach makes sense, and this would be our first effort to make good strides in doing that. And this would be, as we all know, this is what they're being charged this year, so it's not really actually changing. It's just keeping that constant.
but not going back to the previous tuition from previous years.
Michael, can I ask quickly, does that mean that that previously the percentage contribution was around 60%?
Yes, it does. So ideally, in a perfect world, these will all be about 50%. And, you know, some of it's a little bit less, some of them are a little bit higher. You know, some of the costs to run certain programs, like the busing, for instance, the marketing and busing, as we know, the rates really have increased over the last 3 or 4 years. So we haven't changed that user fee in a number of years, so that has kind of gotten off that ratio. But yeah, that would be fair to say. And some of the athletic costs have just been going up, the needs of that program year to year. So we haven't made major changes to that user fee. So at one point we were close to 50-50, and we've kind of that's been reducing each year. But again, we certainly don't want to increase user fees and tuition costs to families. That's not a goal of ours, and we're trying to make everything work. And this is certainly a big piece that allows us to offer these programs and offer the education, the fine arts, performing arts, the athletics, student clubs. But we're in a situation where obviously you have to charge a user fee to do that. Really quickly, so our request this year is at 5.4%. You can see what we've actually officially been funded, which is the green bar graphs. The yellow represents our proposal. So obviously we have to work through this process and work closely with the town. So the 10-year average is about 3.5%. So we're about 2% higher than that this year. But there's certainly a lot of needs that have arisen that we feel like we can advocate strongly for some additional funding for next year. But as we all know, there's going to be work to do to achieve the budget request that's being presented this evening. So this is cost avoidance. I think I have 2 more slides. I think I talk a lot about these each year, but we work very hard to avoid and reduce and save in any areas that we can. So from an expense budget standpoint, we try to purchase from the most state bid list and get the biggest educational discount for supplies, materials that is available out there. We certainly work hard to control our utility costs. We are part of purchasing consortiums. We regulate and modulate our boilers and our occupancy schedules. We moved to LED lighting throughout the district this year, and we're paying that down over, of course, over the next 5 years, but that's all going to control those utility costs. We're part of 2 collaboratives for special education that helps us control some of our district tuition and transportation costs. We have a shared transportation model for students that need to be transported outside the district to schools, and that helps us share the cost of transportation with those 14 other member communities. So we always are trying to design and customize our programming to always meet the need of students and when appropriate, educate students within the district. Food service program, obviously, the food service program, as we all know, was performing very, very well. This has certainly been a disruption, and I think they've responded really well under the circumstance. And we get a weekly testimonials come in from parents about how pleased they are with the food service program this year, in particular the Grab and Go program. So we continue to pursue all available funding options. Grants, federal reimbursements that were available this year. We all know that every student is eligible for a free lunch this year. So certainly lunch, breakfast, we entered an after-school snack program this year. So we're really trying to maximize our federal reimbursement. And we're trying to manage those costs as best we can this year. I'm certainly hopeful that things will return to a more normal situation as we work towards next year. Maintenance operations, just trying to limit the need for outside contract work where appropriate in these areas. And I think we've done a pretty good job at controlling that and doing that this year. We're going to look to do more of that. And then just really constant vigilance of everything that we do from our daily operations. Certainly E-rate funding, federal program that helps us offset internet costs and technology costs. We've pursued all options there. And then I mentioned earlier
LED lighting, and we continue to look at solar. I'll have an update a little bit later in the meeting on where solar stands. So what do we get from the FY22 budget? It's a budget that meets all of our contractual obligations with employees and employee unions. It allows us to meet increases in fixed operational costs for our contracted services. It maintains and adds staff to continue to provide educational style student-teacher ratios, especially at the elementary level. So we maintain those ideal class size guidelines. We enhance operational and instructional technology needs of the district, certainly adding technicians, maintain the adequate health and safety services for all students, staff, and community. I think the addition of the school nurse is essential in allowing us to do that. Addressing social, emotional, and mental health needs of all students, certainly the addition of the school adjustment counselors at the elementary and secondary level, and addressing the operational needs of all 5 schools. The addition of that custodian was essential there. And then from an expense standpoint, continuation with that district 1-to-1 program in grades K through 12, you saw that increase in instructional services. That was mainly technology driven. There was other increases to address needs from the sanitation and health standpoint. We don't see all of that going away. We think we're still going to be sanitizing, could potentially still be needing PPE and so forth, so that some of those line items were adjusted. And then certainly line items were adjusted to continue that preventative maintenance approach to maintaining our 5 schools and surrounding campuses. So where do we go from here? We're going to discuss the ongoing discussion with the finance planning team. There's additional opportunities for the community and for parents to get involved and become aware of what is being funded, of what is being requested. A budget webinar is on March 26th. We'll continue to have we'll do our school committee budget workshops. A public hearing will either be April 12th or April 15th. I think we'll vote at the end of tonight. School committee is due to vote on or about May 6th, and town meeting is on June 5th. So with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit longer than I was hoping, but I'll open it up to any questions for discussion.
Thank you very much, Michael. Excellent presentation as always. A lot of work goes into this, and it's powerful too. Before I just go to the committee members, I know there's one question that was typed in from Mrs. Capizzuto, asking, would the elementary and secondary school adjustment counselor positions be floating amongst the schools?
That's the idea, yes. That they will.
Well, if there's one at the high school right now, would there be one at the high school and one at the middle school, or they would all float? Then, and how many are at the elementary right now?
There's none. There's none at the elementary. The elementary would float among the schools, and I believe the second one would be 6-12. You'd still have one at the high school, which is working with the program a lot, and then you'd have someone to help out both middle and high school.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have lots of notes and questions, but I want to open up to my committee members first. Because comments, questions, thoughts?
Just very thorough, as always.
Thank you. Dana?
I had the luxury of being in the budget subcommittee, so I feel like I've heard some of this before, and I'm going to hold the majority of my questions for the workshop, but thank you. It's a great job.
Rich?
Yeah. Good for now. It's pretty clear.
Chris, anything?
Nope. Michael, as usual, did an excellent job.
I have a few things just to kind of point out here. Number one, I just want to point out to everybody that the out-of-district placements, I mean, while it's important to educate our kids however they need, I just think a few years ago, the committee really put a lot of effort into getting a position at the school that really helped to look at this, and I think just Cynthia Conan has been phenomenal in her role as Director of Student Services, and, you know, we've seen, this is going to be the lowest number of out-of-district placements, you know, knock on wood, and, you know, in the last 10 or 12 years that are on the, that are listed here, which, again, I mean, you saw a budget savings from that, and so that's important to note that there's been a lot of efforts made to try to educate our students within the district if possible. Just to point out, the one thing that I want to emphasize here is if you look at what's being requested, like I tried to point out that one of the positions we're asking for is just getting a position back that we have already. All we're asking for the, you know, the very basic recommended one are things that are literally critical for COVID. You know, cleaning and nurses. You know, then the ones that are just like our our REACH goals, our social emotional learning that is, again, related to COVID. Now we didn't even put up the real request budget, which is what, 14.2 positions, about $1 million of extra positions. None of this is advancing where we're at. This is literally just treading water, and it's still a 5% increase, 5.4% increase. And so I just think it's really important. Like, at times we've tried to say we're going to do this and move this way and that way. We're treading water with this budget right now. We're literally just trying to address the needs that we see from COVID. And it's kind of sad that we can't do anything more than that, but that's where we're at. But I just think it's important to point out that that's all we're really doing within this budget is increasing. It is just directly related to COVID-related response.
I believe it's about $200,000 above complete level services. Exactly what we're doing.
The question for Michael, the LED savings. I know with the LED project that was done, we're basically paying for it for a number of years from the savings.
Correct.
Essentially.
Yep.
At what fiscal year will we start seeing the savings?
So it's a 5-year payback. So we technically wouldn't see that until fiscal year 26. So we're still a little ways away. The hope is that the estimated savings is that would still be greater. So we would exceed what some of the estimates were of what the monthly savings would be. We haven't seen that this year. We've seen significant savings that was somewhat in line with what we had predicted on a monthly basis. But I also think what's impacting that is that we haven't been opening these buildings. The operational hours haven't been typically what they normally are in a normal year. We don't have groups in here all weekend. We don't have groups here till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night like you would in a pre-COVID in a normal year, which was some of what that savings was based on when we ran some of those numbers. So when that begins to go back to more of a normal situation, I think we'll experience more. I mean, we'll spend a little bit more, but I think we'll experience more savings too.
And then, so the school adjustment council suggested that the ratio is, right now we have 1 for 660 kids in the high school. What is the recommended ratio of adjustment counselors? Do you know?
I do not.
Like I thought I heard a few years ago, like 1 to 200 or something.
So I don't nurse counseling, guidance counseling standpoint, I think that's sort of about 1 to 200, 1 to 300 ratio from the American Guidance Association said. So from I think I haven't seen the school adjustment.
Yeah, we can look into
a little bit different position, but
I will say that it functions much in the same way though as special education. The number of students that we're able to keep in district through programs that we have with adjustment counselors and through counselors. It may not be a student on an IEP or 504, but it may be a student with other needs. That these counselors being in our buildings and working directly with kids will pay dividends over time and certainly be a huge benefit to our students and staff.
And a couple more things. I know full day kindergarten is always a hot topic. I appreciate that we're making an effort here. And I hope we can keep this in there where we're getting on. We're losing by only reducing it $750. We lose almost $150,000 in revenue, 145, whatever that has to be made up. And so it's just, and as you said, going the rest of the way would be another $550,000. And I like that we're trying to make an effort for it and hope that we can get there. The one-to-one, the one-to-one, is that to keep the one-to-one buying the computers? Is that being funded in this budget, or is that assuming something from CIPC?
So at the moment, we do have funds in this budget to fund that. The CIPC process is still working through that, so we don't really know where it's going to stand. I think we'll know more as we get towards the public hearing, where the CIPC is in their process to see if any adjustments would be necessary in that area.
Yeah, I'll just say again that you know, the CIPC process has been great, and it's been helping us to fund our original model, which was starting in 7th grade to 12th grade. Because of COVID, every kid K-12 and every teacher K-12 has been using devices now every day, and we're not going to go backwards from that again. We talk about possible silver linings here, but we've expanded what kids are able to do in the classroom. Every teacher now is using Google Classroom, and there's so many advantages to that for kids. So really, some of what we're talking about here is those devices that they're using now are 5 to 6 years old with the younger children. And as we know, you know, the old school thinking was you give the high school kids the devices and then they trickle down. You can't do that anymore. Everyone needs the most up-to-date software and video chats and all those things. So we really need to support many more grades. We do think over time that we'll you know, those devices are lasting and they're working, but we certainly need to refresh this model. So that's where you see it.
And my last comment was just that, I mean, it's always frustrating at budget time because we want to do so much more and we see that the state aid is just not there to support it. You know, we need more state aid to do it fully, but I appreciate everything that the town does because the town has been forward thinking. The PSA has really helped with the keeping insurance costs in line, and you know, the finance planning team, which, you know, Rich and I are members of right now, has been very supportive. And so, you know, I do think that even with a bad situation, I mean, it's sad that we're actually getting better funding this year because of COVID, and we've gotten it in years past, and it's just sad that we can't, you know, adequately fund the schools when there's not a pandemic happening. Now I will get off the soapbox. We have the thoughts, and now we can. But thank you very much, Mike. Excellent presentation as always. More to come. If anybody wants to people that were here. Okay. Next ones should be a little quicker. First one is Facilities Master Plan Committee. You want me to talk about this, Joe? You want to talk about it?
Sure, you can have it.
So, I mean, right now Diana was on the Facilities Master Plan Committee. So I know that their work was paused for a number of months. It was supposed to be a 1-year thing, but it's now going to go over to the next year. Diana hadn't actually pulled papers to run yet, and we weren't sure if she was running or not. And so I know Abby Hrobert, who's the chair of that committee, has said that there's going to be work being done before the election, the meetings that are happening, and it's going to kind of go over till after the election. And so she just wanted to make sure that whoever was appointed, whoever was going to do that, would continue on for that. And so we had put this on as a discussion point. Now you are running. That's a great thing to hear, and hopefully you beat nobody. But together, we work together, we can beat nobody. But the question, I guess, is this will continue into next year, and so most of the work will be done later on, but some of the preliminary stuff will be done now. So I just think we should talk about who wants to do this. I think it sort of lines up with kind of like CIPC stuff. It's like it's discussing with the town. I don't think a lot has to do with the school. It's just looking at the master plan. I know Rich is already doing one thing with the town. So I think this is just a talk about who wants to do it because it's going to be for a lot of next year as well. So I don't know what people talk about. I don't know if you want to stay with something like that, Diana, or if that's not your cup of tea and other people have the desire to do it.
In the recent past, there has been one meeting request that came through for this that I wasn't able to make because of work. I don't know when they're being planned, what time of day. I think Abby is making the request specifically to be completely transparent because she wants you on the committee. So I'm an advocate of you being on it if you want to be on it. To be honest, I mean, straight.
I don't care who's on the committee. I think if people want to be involved.
I don't know if I can make the times that they're, but I don't know if, did she indicate anything related to the time?
She didn't say anything about time.
No, I don't know when they are. I think we should maybe find out. I don't know if that matters to anyone else. It certainly does me because I work full time, but I just don't want to be a hindrance and not be able to go. That's the only thing.
She just indicated to me that they had some design people coming in. They're going to be doing some presentations too. So
yeah.
I don't
If anyone's
think
interested in the town work, I have no problem stepping back from that,
I know that, again, I know that your first term here, you got saddled with a lot of the town-related jobs. It's going to be a lot of work. So I know that they've expressed some desire to maybe change up your appointments for your next term.
Yeah, if I do get elected for another term, I was going to advocate for a little bit of a mix-up, especially with CIPC, because it's a significant demand on time. It's weekly and it's during the end of the workday, and it has been a challenge for me. Yeah.
I know Rich is doing the one thing with the select board, and I know Janine's got a lot.
I don't know if that's an ongoing thing or not. I talked to somebody and then, that might be it for a while. I wouldn't consider that an obligation. But I'm, this would be something I'd be interested in, but I'm also, having one.
Well, but again, I actually think it's good for school committee members to be involved in the town overall.
No,
and so I think it would be a nice way for you to meet some of the people in town as well, if you'd like. And so if you have a desire to do that, I know as
you have a great desire to do it.
I've already done it, and it's a great way to, keep in contact and, know what's going on in the town and stuff. So they're great.
And there's hopefully some exciting things going on with that.
Yeah.
That would be good to be a part of.
Like I said, it's the kind of thing that I'm definitely.
if it's something that you're interested in, I think I would support you in doing that one, just because.
I think it makes sense, though, too, if you don't mind jumping over. If you are on the master plan, it probably makes sense to be on the CIPC, because it's kind of hand in hand, so.
We can talk about that in May, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a 1 year, right?
It's a 3-year term.
But it's up.
Yeah.
It's up for me, yeah.
Dr. Daly?
I was just gonna say, the suggestion was, it's to fill this through May for this year, because no one's on there, and then we'd
I'll do
reappoint.
it again. Okay.
Yeah, but again, the idea is, just say, it'd be the same
It would be the person
person.
who would care about that.
Correct.
And since it doesn't appear to be any risk of
Yeah.
the third person running, you can be assured that any one of us would be, I'm happy to do it.
If it's of interest to you, I think.
It is.
Yeah, I think, I would support that. I think.
The other thing is that it's so much easier now, but I don't know what it's going to be like in September or October, but
Yeah.
that's generally true, so.
Rich, do you need to know the times of the meetings because of work, or do you think you'll have the flexibility to handle it?
I'm pretty flexible in terms of, I don't get locked into any too many times.
Okay, that's good.
I would
Totally go for it.
I would support
That's
appointing.
fun.
So, do you want to have a motion to appoint Rich as the member of the Facilities Master Plan Committee?
Up until the month of May.
Yeah.
I so nominate.
Second. Well,
We didn't ask Chris if you wanted to do it.
I just see him chiming in.
I want to run parade, please.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Bye.
Chris? Aye. Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Rich.
Congratulations, Rich. Well, I'll be and then be yelled at by Abby probably.
Yeah.
I'll just say Rich outmaneuvered me to get to the district.
Tough being built before.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we have Secondary School Building Committee. And maybe perhaps either Janine or Dr. Daly can tell us what this is about.
Sure. Do I need to?
Sure, go ahead.
So the SSPC for many years has functioned. In our district, we took a look at this I think the Facilities Master Plan also got us thinking about other committees as well. I think that what we need to do is officially appoint myself as the superintendent to serve in this committee as a representative. Mr. Sonny Campagna also taking over for Mr. Hardacre. And At this time, Janine is the only school committee member, so Mr. Chuck Carucci, who's the chair of this committee, has recommended myself, Mr. Campagna, and a second school committee member to be on the SSBC. We don't see there being a tremendous amount of meetings at this time. I know this was a committee that met so much over the years, obviously, but it is important to have it there. It's a little bit different of a group. So Mr. Carucci is currently writing and accepting resignations from people who are no longer either on the committee or on the group. But in addition to tonight's recommended appointments, they actually need to be appointed as a joint school committee and select board meeting that we would need to schedule. I don't believe it would need to be long. And it looks possibly like when this was done in the past, you may have just joined the select board meeting for a certain amount of time for that agenda item, and then that looks to be how it was. I don't know if anyone was part of that.
I'm trying to remember, and because Kathy left, John came on.
Yeah, it was when Mr. LaPrette was added, was the one, it was 2014 was when that happened. It was quite some time ago.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's right. I remember that. You just attend the meeting and then.
You were actually signed up because we didn't have a town administrator.
So we needed someone with the NC.
Right, and so you're technically.
That's how we went to a select board meeting.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe it didn't need to be a special meeting, you just were co-board members, and we did that item, and then we moved on. So that's probably what we'll do. But I think tonight you could make the recommendation to appoint, hopefully me, Mr. Campagna, and then the other school committee member to serve with Janine.
Well, just a little bit of a background. I've been on it since April of 2004. And the last meeting that we had as a group was May of 2018. So you're not going to be too busy at this point in time if you want to recommend. It's just more of a, I think the state has mandated we need X amount of people in this, area.
And what are the chances of getting deposed if you're on it?
You won't. I was actually supposed to be and have not. So, but.
And you were actually there all that time. We should probably get Chris on it because he hasn't been around. He's been around the shortest, so there's no chance of him being deposed.
Good theory, Rich.
How long is it for, what's the jury?
It's till it's dissolved. Yeah, so, like, if you run and you are here and it hasn't, and you're the person put on the committee, and it's not dissolved in 5 years, but you stop, then the school committee would have to.
Appoint someone else.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not dissolved because we're pending stuff.
Litigation, yeah. And
There's still a little bit to spend and some things to sort.
very little.
Very little.
Yeah. Depends on how the litigation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do I get more say in the litigation then?
No.
I mean, I don't care.
No,
I mean,
the school has no, the SSBC has no say over it because it's the select board that brought the claim.
we're putting a name in. I
Yeah,
don't care.
it's whoever it
If
is.
somebody wants to do it, they can. I'll do it if nobody else wants.
I'd vote for Scott because he said he's gonna re-up again.
It's litigation headed.
I'll give you another way to rant.
Yeah.
There you go.
Not that I need a
I like
platform, I
it.
make my own.
Haven't you already read it and everything?
Well, I read the law.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, perfect.
He's a shoo-in.
I did read
No
the law,
intention of
so.
reading that.
So I move, if I may, I move that we appoint Dr. Daly to serve as superintendent representative, Mr. Campagna to serve as facilities director, and Scott Buckley to serve as an additional school committee member on the, that we recommend that, joint select board, school committee meeting, appoint those three people. Does that
Second.
work?
Second,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, roll call vote. Rich?
Aye?
Janine?
Hi.
Diana?
Hi.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay.
We'll work to schedule a joint meeting for the official.
I'm a loser when I go to some of the select board meetings anyway, so. mean, if we do it on a Monday night, we could probably just join in anyways from here. Second reading of policy. I'm not gonna say a lot. I'll let Janine lead us in the second reading.
No, I'll let Scott, sorry.
Oh,
I'll let Chris take this one.
You were so nice last time to let me do it. You take it this time.
Okay,
that.
well,
We
if
did
you
that
want
for
me
you.
to say, all right. To make a recommendation to move to approve the second reading of the policy JHSB-R to keep, and to keep the track changes as delineated in the document.
I second.
Okay. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Anna?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Evaluation. We're only doing superintendent. We're not doing anything with school committee tonight?
No, school committee's the 22nd, I
Okay.
believe.
Superintendent evaluation update. Who is leading us in this?
Mr. Chris.
Chris, you are leading us in this.
Yeah. 1 second. Let me just pull up the document. This is just going to take.
Want to share your screen or not?
Yeah, I can share my screen. Hold on just a moment. Sorry.
He also has the document.
Does he have permission, Chris? Patrick?
You should.
Okay.
Yeah, I can. I just I was in the wrong Google Drive. All right, here we are. Perfect. Okay, let me know if that's working.
Coming. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. Good news, Dr. Daly. We like you. So just to walk through this really quickly, we all went through and rated your progression for, as we know, for formative assessments. We're just looking to see, are you on target, off target, or is there some reason that hasn't begun? For your professional practice goal, to ensure the continued highest level of effective strategic leadership for the North Reading Public Schools, the superintendent will continue to engage in and support professional development activities that will develop the skills in strategic and strategy development, data analysis, professional leadership, leadership team development, and school committee superintendent relations. Dr. Daly submitted a few examples of things that he's been doing to move forward in this. They're available in this window for superintendent's comments, and I'll just read some of the comments of the members of the committee. Mr. Buckley felt Dr. Daly has excelled in his role as leader of the district. He's also been an integral part of his broader community by collaborating with other superintendents to develop standards for reopening our schools. And also noted Dr. Daly portrayed exemplary strategic leadership in the planning and execution of our schools reopening. I also feel confident that he's met or exceeded the key results he outlined for himself in this area to warrant an on-target status. Would any members of the committee like to?
Not being called out individually, so I apologize. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, sorry about that. But would you like to add any comments for goal number 1? Okay, very well. For student learning goals, superintendent will work to create the conditions necessary for all students to achieve at the highest levels in a hybrid learning environment. By the end of the 2020-2021 school year, the superintendent will review each of the school improvement plans for the 5 schools and collaborate on the individual goals of the principals at each school. Strong collaboration with school principals and other administrators on the development of administrator goals, activities, and benchmarks will serve to establish a framework for elevating student achievement through targeted efforts. And noted here is that the school improvement plans are coming into alignment, progress made. Of course, there's still some work to do. Any other comments from anybody on the committee? Okay, great. For district improvement plan, superintendent will use his findings from his first year in the role to facilitate the development of the school's district's new strategic plan, NRPS 2025. A strategy for the future that includes a shared vision and strategic direction for the North Reading Public Schools. The strategic plan includes identified objectives in the areas of teaching and learning, support services, and equity.
The strategic plan will continue to serve as a blueprint for elevating student achievement and providing an overall advancement of the school district through the year 2025. Comments here. I think that Dr. Daly is on target here based on his commentary, but I'd be interested to see an update on NRPS 2025. I feel confident that Dr. Daly is on track to deliver on this goal by the proposed target of end of school year 2021. I would also like to have a view into the NRPS 2025 progress and process. And just for any members of the public, of course, Dr. Daly, we don't need him to go into this now. This is just our chance to give him some organized feedback and indicate any questions we have. Any other comments on this topic from the committee, or Dr. Daly, anything you'd like to add?
Sure, just that, I'm happy to provide an update. We certainly were off track because of not having the time this summer during our retreat to do what we typically do, but we have been working on it at the administrative level, and we do have some things we can share out. I'm just still working on it, but I'm happy to come up with a time to present that, certainly before July.
Okay. And I think what, like we said here, from your commentary, it sounds like you are. It's just we're trying to see if you're on track, and it sounds like you are, but we just haven't seen it yet.
We have a neat graphic and everything, so we'll show you what we've been working on.
Right. That's the idea behind why the grading's a poor word for it, but why this rubric is really set to an on track or not on track, and isn't any more detailed than that, because it's our chance to find out what we need to learn more about, and Dr. Daly's chance to kind of hear that feedback and then use it to inform going forward. Okay, for the 2020-2021 school year, the superintendent will prepare the district for the challenges related to COVID-19 and explore, design, and implement the school safety protocols and procedures needed for students and staff to have a successful year. Obviously, COVID has been number 1, 2, and 3, priority number 1, 2, and 3 this year. Dr. Daly has helped North Reading become a model district in our area. There's still a great deal of work to do, though, and as the goal now is to get all students back full-time in a safe way possible. Dr. Daly certainly addressed the challenges related to opening schools in this COVID environment and implemented protocols and procedures that were well thought out and executed upon. Any further comments?
Currently, I did not have an opinion.
I opened the wrong one. There was one where I went through and fixed that.
No, it's not either.
For some reason, Rich doesn't agree, but everybody else thought you're doing great, Dr. Daly. So, the superintendent will continue to improve upon his communication through the use of social media, his blog, and other technologies to serve as methods of communication and as informational resources among and between the school district and the community. Use of surveys throughout the year to get feedback from the community has been excellent, is one note. Any further comments? Okay, let's wrap up. The superintendent will support a district-wide investigation of social justice and equity for all students and staff and develop the steps of an action plan to be included as part of NRPS 2025. Notes are similar as before here. I think Dr. Daly is on target, but we know that social justice is a goal for all this year, but perhaps we could have an update or some examples on how this has come to fruition this year. And a note that Dr. Daly's communication throughout this year has been extremely effective. I also feel confident that he's addressed the social justice aspect of this goal as several aspects of the effort have been presented to the committee on various occasions. Any follow-up comments from the committee or by Dr. Daly?
I have one.
Please.
What are you gonna do when COVID goes away?
Your day job?
So interesting. I will say, one of the things that I'm, that was sort of a result of COVID with the funding was we extended this not replacing myself, right, for the whole calendar year of last year. And I just want to say how much my whole team, but especially having Mr. Colleen now as the assistant superintendent, it's just, all of a sudden I just realized, it's like I have my right arm, and Michael, my right, my left, I've got this team of assistants with Mr. Colleen there. So he is going to share and present also. I think it'll be good for him to give an update now, a few months in. And I hope that we can almost combine, because I think what he's going to be able to show you about what the administrative team is doing around social justice, the course that we're running, and a few other pieces, I think that would be a great update. Because really, for me, my goal here is to make this organized for everyone. And I'm just so thrilled. And part of what I'm trying to do with Mr. Colleen, my biggest goal is to try to give him the opportunity to do things that I never was able to do because I was doing all these other things. I've been trying to take things off his plate. The fact that he's able to stay in district a lot this year, I think it's fantastic. And he's done such a great job organizing some courses that when I joined the course the other day, just as I'm sort of auditing the course, right? But to see all of the teachers that are in there, all the administrators joining together to really unpack this topic is fantastic. So I think that so many of all of our educators have social justice as a goal, as well as hybrid teaching and learning. And then many of them are taking this course. Others are doing book studies, or there's so many things going on. But I think we could probably address that through a joint presentation when he shares as well. So I look forward to sharing that with you in the coming weeks. Not today.
Great, thank you. And that covers everything we had to say. We find that you're on target for all of your goals, and we appreciate all of the work.
So this is to the whole committee, but also to Chris. So you did the superintendent, so I'll take over the school committee evaluation, which is due March 22nd, the meeting. So don't do like I did and wait till the last minute to do the evaluation.
I just want to say, I think we should think about a discussion in the summer about whether it feels like the right thing to do to not remove our names from the contract. I think I did it when I was doing committee because that was what was done in the past, but it does feel like we should be speaking publicly about what we think about this. So,
Rich, I had the exact same thought, and I when we talked about it, Janine and I and Dr. Daly, and when I put up that folder and the note, I had kind of gone with consistent what we've always said, which was to remove the names. And I kind of goofed right here. I should have put on the other file that didn't. But when I was reviewing them today, I was thinking, oh man, I think it's better if we keep the names. I think it's a bit more appropriate if we do. That said, it was still I didn't mean to do this in this very setting, but yeah, I agree going forward.
I actually thought I had rated you not on target on one of them, so. I rated us not on target.
Yeah, that's what I did that as well. Yeah, I was trying.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say one thing that was noticeable, like the school committee one was a lot more things, and yours was nice and clean, and Chris was the 5 points, so.
Work in progress.
Yep. Okay, minutes. Brianna.
I move to accept the January 28th open session minutes as written.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And I as well. 5-0. Thank you.
I'd like a motion to accept the February 8th, 2021 open session minutes as written.
Second, sorry.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll vote. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I as well. That's 5-0. Very much. Budget update, Mr. Connolly?
Yeah, thank you. So this evening is a couple of quick updates. First off, in the packet, there was the student activity quarter 2 report, which reflects activity from October 1st through December 31st of this fiscal year. In the report, as we've done in the past, you can see the certified reconciled account balances for the 5 schools. And then I also included more activity at the middle school and the high school with sub-account balance. So, it's typical that we kind of close out and reconcile reports about 30 to 45 days or so at the end of that quarter. It's not a lot that's too different from the previous report, so I'm really just trying to over to get to any questions.
I think I had any question or stop tonight, so we're good.
Okay. I was going to provide just a very quick solar update. I didn't put it in the packet, but the next one, March 22nd, I have been continuing discussions with RMLD, going back to really early February to late January. So I had a conference call webinar with the RMLD representative today. They presented to me sort of their preliminary presentation of what options could be. So they did an RFI that came out in the fall to kind of analyze that. They're going to come on March 22nd and make that presentation. There's still some more things I asked them to follow up on, but they are going to present to the full committee on March 22nd. And essentially, their plan is to kind of just talk a little bit about sort of high-level solar, how the program has worked, how they try and what their objectives are in the community solar program with their four participating communities, obviously. I asked them to kind of do a little bit of an overview of the legislative process and how that's changed, how that's impacted the incentives, tax incentives. That market did change, which really shifted them, what the options are. I asked them to kind of do that as well. They are going to walk through from their perspective what our options are based on the RFI that they got, and then they're going to talk based on what you could expect on each option from a revenue standpoint or a cost saving standpoint. Again, it's not firm numbers, but it's based on the RFI that they did and what the analysis was. And then it's going to kind of be a little bit like next steps and where we go from here. So that is going to happen on March 22nd.
One suggestion on that. So when we ended up doing the LED project, we had a small committee that included some people from finance committee. I don't know if you were planning on doing something like that again, but if so, it would be nice to invite those people. I'm particularly thinking of, like, I know you had Wayne as part of it before, and I know that Don Kelleher was an important part of that. I wonder if you might want to just see if we're going to have those people again involved, it would be nice for them to hear the presentation as well, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe a little premature. I don't know, because we're not really analyzing like an official RFP or even, it's more like high level at that point. So it's more like these from what we see from our analysis, the information that we've done. These are what we see the options are, and then it's kind of be like, I think we have to decide after that presentation, in my opinion, do we feel like it's worth, like there's a project there that we think makes sense in North Reading, or either town or school, and do we want to pursue like an official RFP at that point? It could be a joint RFP or just a school RFP, and actually develop a committee to evaluate that RFP result. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have more feedback, more folks involved.
I think we should at least invite, Don Kelleher, for example, and maybe Mike Gilberto, if there's going to be a town side to it. And I think it might be nice to at least, again, they're not required to go, but I think it would be nice to let them know that it's happening.
I think town hall is going to be in the study. Town hall was part of the study. Michael Gilberto and I were involved back in the summer.
Yeah, so I would let them know if they're coming to our meeting to present, in case they would like to attend, so they can at least hear the presentation.
If there's a conflict, the meetings will be recorded, we can share the presentation.
Right, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, I think it would be nice just because, again, I think Don, I think both of them have had really good, excellent feedback on different things in the past, and so including them early on would be nice. Even if they can't make it, they at least have the option. Thank you very much. Staffing, anything, Dr. Daly? Kids and donations? Nothing right now?
This is the first time in a good couple of years that you didn't have anything.
Right.
That's odd.
Not a good trend to start. Yeah.
We've received a lot this year.
Oh, I know. I just found it very strange.
Yeah, one thing I will say about that, typically I think in the previous years I've done kind of a quarterly update on the PTO in kind. We kind of decided this is going to happen at the end, so we're going to do like a one presentation at the end. Everyone thought that was easier this year. PTO treasurers.
Subcommittee update. Finance planning team met on March 2nd. I think pretty standard. We went through the revenue, not much has changed with the revenue. And we had the first look at the town request, the first look at the school budget. We have a gap of, we just went over, actually, did we show the gap? I mean, we have a gap of, yeah, we have a gap of about 800 and something thousand, and then they have a similar gap, although it's worth pointing out that this is just they're at the stage of all the different town departments have made the request, so they haven't been cut down or anything yet. So we always start out sort of one step ahead, because everybody gets cut down by Dr. Daly and Michael before, you know, it even gets here. So with the town, they're all different departments, so they get presented. We saw that information. The town administrator will make his recommendations from that later on. So I think we were about 1.6 combined. We were about 1.6, 1.7 million short. And I will just point out that in years past, we saw that big number, and it wasn't really a real number because they haven't put debt stabilization in there yet. There's some things they haven't put in there yet. This year, they put all that in right away. And so I don't actually think the revenue is going to be all that much higher going forward. It might be a little bit, like they cut down the health insurance expense a little bit. It went from 7.5 to 6.6. So there's a little bit more revenue. Hopefully there's a little bit more that can be found, but I think a lot of the stuff that in the past was held off on was already put in to start. So we'll see.
If I may, I can actually, for the first time this year, give an update on a NORCAM meeting.
Oh, nice.
They didn't have any meetings over the summer. They did a sort of test run on a virtual meeting in September, which they only was for the board members. Then since then, since we started scheduling meetings on Thursdays, I've had like 2 conflicts, these meetings, and then, anyway, so I finally went to one in February. They're still there. They're still there, and, you know, doing whatever they do. That's my update.
Great update.
What was the date of that meeting this week?
I'll tell you before we. Yeah, you can just let me.
And actually, I went to the CPAC meeting last night. It was their first meeting, technically on the liaison to that, and just a round table talking about what's coming up. And the new co-president's there, so I'm going not seeing Steve Burbicki after running.
The co-president, Mrs. Dustin, and who else is the other one?
Yeah, let's call it
I'm
like
sorry.
that. Mrs. Piper, I think.
Dr. Daly, was the 25th of February.
Okay, upcoming meetings. Athletic Subcommittee is March 17th at 1 p.m. Fine Arts Subcommittee is March 17th at 3:30 p.m. Finance Planning Team is April 6th at 8 a.m. Administrative report, Dr. Daly.
A couple of things to share. The cybersecurity grant we received for the 2021-22 school year, so we applied again after doing this for last year. They are telling us that it's going to be up to 50% all new material, and then some reinforcing of some very important material. So we are planning to roll that out with all staff again as we did this year. We just feel that it's just a different kind of safety, and it's never been more important. The grant basically covers the cost of the program. There are modules, as we've discussed, and there are phishing simulations, because as we know, if you don't know what you're doing and you click on something, it can affect your district, and the value added to this knowledge is really hard to quantify, because the cost of some kind of cyber attack, ransomware on our district is very difficult to quantify. So we're going to have all of our staff participate that again this year. I wanted to just share, before I forget, also just a shout out to our nurses, especially all of our teachers and staff have done an amazing job. Our nurses with the pooled testing have really gone above and beyond. We've also brought in a substitute nurse, Ms. Steele, who's been fantastic and really is working so well at the elementary. Ms. Lombardi, our floater nurse, is running the pool testing at the secondary level. So I just want to make sure I shared that as well. They've been just outstanding this year, continue to rise to every challenge, because in addition to their regular everyday jobs, they're doing all the contact tracing, and now we've added pool testing on top of that, and they've met it with grace and poise, and it's been highly, highly successful. And for them to keep everyone's nerves where they need to be, and to provide them with this data and updates. It's been outstanding. Parents have shared with me that they have nominated a teacher. It's quite an amazing letter. It's a little bit lengthy. Do you want me to share it, or do you want me to pull some highlights at this time? What would you say?
Good.
It says highlights. Do you want to forward it to us afterwards?
I will definitely forward it to you. I will just say that this comes from the whole class. I'll just start off with this is from February 17th. It was a great pleasure that we, the parents of Miss Slavin's first grade class, nominate Miss Andrea Slavin for the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. Miss Slavin is a teacher at the Hood School, and she is a first grade teacher. As we are trying to adapt the unique circumstances of raising and educating young children during a pandemic, Ms. Slavin has been a true beacon in helping us navigate the course while we support our students emotionally and academically. Before the current academic year started, Ms. Slavin sent out a welcome email to her new student families, letting them know she was working on making a classroom safe, but still warm and inviting. She included photos to show students how the classroom would be set up, with desks 6 feet apart and social distancing markers on the floor. She also included photos of herself, with and without a mask, to give incoming students a level of comfort, to be able to see their teacher's face, and to know what to expect in the coming school year. They're also sharing that, I'll just share another paragraph, that, Ms. Slavin is truly exceptional, compassionate, and talented educator who has helped our children thrive and flourish during these challenging times. She is the gold standard of teachers and will be an excellent fit for this program. She's also our field hockey coach. She does a phenomenal job. I will say, she is a highlight when we visit classrooms and seeing some of the work that she's doing. And for me, it was one of the first times that I saw, and many of our teachers are doing this, but with a first grade class, but teaching kids both home and in classroom, which I think, again, once we saw that it could work with even our youngest learners, it was something that was shared with many others. So I really enjoyed working with her over the years, and I was thrilled to see this email. It was then signed by all the folks in the class. So a really nice tribute that I wanted to share with you this evening.
Nice.
And what was that a nomination for?
Massachusetts Teacher of the Year.
Will we know anything until will it be much later? It's just a nomination right now. She's not. Is she actually nominated for it, or is it just?
She's nominated by they shared that she has been nominated by the class, so they put this together. So it's just not she's not at this time, to my knowledge, a finalist or anything like that. I'm just sharing this in the administrative report.
Well, thank you. I think there was one correspondence you wanted to read in.
I did want to share, Ms. Antolini had shared an email with the entire committee about, the central question is about what our plan is for reopening. I think that we did discuss that in a lot of detail earlier this evening. The message being that, many children are struggling, not just academically, but mentally, socially, and emotionally. I think we certainly recognize that. I think we're all in agreement that we're going to do everything possible to bring students back. And we will certainly have a plan, as we mentioned earlier tonight, forthcoming, with most likely, based on what we're going to hear tomorrow, that April start date. And I feel that's where we would probably set our targets, even if somehow the state changed its mind. But I think that we're going to get some clear guidance tomorrow, and hopefully something in writing from the state in the very near future as well.
Fun. Thank you. Anything other than future business? Next meetings are Monday, March 22nd at 6:30 p.m., which is a middle school presentation. We have a budget workshop Wednesday, March 31st at 3 p.m. Thursday, are we setting it for April 15th?
I'm suggesting Thursday, April 15th.
And does that work for people? Thursday, April 15th at 6:30 p.m. and that'll be the public hearing for the budget. And then Wednesday, April 28th will be another budget workshop if we need. Any other things? And before 10 o'clock. A motion to adjourn.
If you wait 30 seconds, it'll be 10 o'clock.
Give me a second.
I second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Hi.
Chris? Aye. I'm an aye as well. We are adjourned at 9:59 p.m. Thank you, everyone.